Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Conor O'Gara, repping one Paulo Banchero today. New Magic jerseys, fire.
See,
For
he's
those
just looking
watching
for
on
an excuse
YouTube.
to get the guns out, folks. Don't let him fool you. It's Florida. It's got only a couple days on the calendar. No, they have beautiful sunshiny weather in December down there. Connor's like, I hit arms yesterday. I'm Paolo today. You know?
We hit arms 2 days ago. Yesterday was a squat and cardio day.
There you go.
Should have hit arms yesterday. Should have hit a tan at some point in my life. Still working on that. So for those on the YouTube audience that are being blinded by this, apologies. Your boy has been living in Florida for 10 plus years and just believes in suntan lotion. So apologies for that. But yeah, Will, week 5, it has arrived. And don't you know it, so has the SEC's annual opponents for the new 9-game schedule. Don't like that we're calling it permanent opponents as well. It's only a 4-year deal, people. We're going to be able to reassess. If it's very lopsided, it will inevitably be lopsided. It will inevitably be changed. Permanent is permanent. Not permanent is what this is. So don't get too worked up about it. Did you get worked up about anything besides the Florida LSU rivalry no longer existing on an annual basis and instead being a semi-annual basis, I think we get to call it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you know me, I want to have, the clearest chance for my team to win a championship, right? So I'm excited. I'm like, hey, don't have to play Alabama. They've been a historical power. I was sad about Florida because, I mean, come on, that's been a fun one lately for
One of my
Tigers.
favorites.
But I looked at these opponents. I'm like, okay, Arkansas, A&M, and Ole Miss. I'm like, okay, like that's kind of easier. But then it's crazy because it's almost like they did the Auburn thing and they front loaded to where it's like 2026 is super hard, 2027 is super easy, and I feel like a lot of teams are feeling this way. Like some teams are going, lots of teams are playing back-to-back away games or back-to-back home games with their rivals. So this is just another one of those things where it's like 95% of what the SEC does feels very thought out and like they're leading the pack. And unfortunately to me, this just kind of feels like they're falling in line with the Big Ten and kind of caving to peer pressure because it doesn't feel as thought out as some of the things that we've seen Greg Sankey do.
I feel like the competitive balance is there, though. I don't really look at this way that they played out because, like, I did the easiest annual opponents versus the toughest annual opponents. I didn't feel like it was that lopsided. I still think Auburn having to play Alabama-Georgia every year until you tell me that Alabama is just a total doormat and is losing to teams like Auburn on an annual basis. I still think that's really difficult, but yeah, they also I think didn't change the home and road with that. Like they have the same year they'll be playing those two teams away, and I thought they would do that differently, but it's really difficult to keep a million rivalries intact while maintaining competitive balance. And so I do feel a little bit of sympathy for that, and I feel a little bit of sympathy for the rivalries that will not be played on an annual basis. Difficult thing to do when you get 16 teams involved. Yeah.
100%. I think you hit on something at the top too, right? Because we have this idea of permanence in college football. Something like a TV deal that was supposed to be 10 years, right, can be cut off at any moment. But what is your level of confidence that this 4-year slate is going to be untouched? Like we know the conference opponents for 4 years.
I think they're not going to change it within. They haven't done that. They had a lopsided set of schedules for this year, and they weren't willing to step in and change that. I don't think anybody would have looked at the way that this played out with their schedules like Mizzou compared to what Oklahoma had, just polar opposite ends of the spectrum. I don't think anybody would have looked at those schedules and gone, well, those are balanced. That if they were really truly caring about that to the point where they felt the need to step in, they would have. So I don't think that they're going to step in within this 4-year stretch. Now, changing that after the fact, that's a different story. And you do actually have data that can back that up and tweak that if necessary. But it's a tough thing to do. It's a very tough thing to figure out because we have very different opinions on these schedules a few years from now, as opposed to how we feel about them right now in the moment, wherein it looks like Arkansas got a really raw deal because Arkansas always gets a really, really raw deal.
Yeah, and again, Mizzou is somehow, God's favorite child of the SEC, which is so funny. But just to like kind of run this back, they developed a little bit of a matrix when Texas and Oklahoma joined and weighed like the success of each team, kind of split them into divisions and said, okay, each division, like the top is going to play each other, bottom is going to play each other, which is why Oklahoma ended up with a much harder schedule than Texas because they had been historically a little bit better recently. Now that ended up helping Texas as Texas has kind of risen as Oklahoma has fallen. And then they ran it back, right? They just flipped home and away. So Texas no use first year. They'd use this matrix. And then the second year they said, okay, we did a great job. Now we're going to do the opposite and flip home and away. And then to your point, now they've done this 4-year block. So I'm with you. I think that we know those opponents. And to kind of piggyback off what you said, it's kind of funny to historically weigh, hey, for 80% of my life, having to play Auburn would have been seen as a bad thing because Auburn was consistently winning at least 8-9 games every year. Now it's like, can't wait to see those boys on the plains, So in 4 years, we may be viewing these schedules very differently.
How do you view facing Diego Pavia every single year, knowing that he's going to find a way to be at Vandy throughout the 2020s? How do you view that? That's a tough out. It's not an automatic win. I'm just saying, like, you got to factor these things into it.
Very true.
Yeah, so we have a great pod coming up today. We're getting you ready for Week 5, a loaded Week 5 slate. We're going to discuss the Jean Mateer injury. Unfortunately, that news came out on Tuesday. We have 6 games to be able to break down, all of which have a spread of 1 score as of this recording, which is awesome. Absolutely love that. Plus, Ryan McGee is going to join us in a little bit to talk about his E60 doc on Lane. Plus, we get into some bottom 10 talk with a couple of preseason darlings who have made the cut in the bottom 10 this week. And then we're going to close with Lad of the Week. But first, word from our friends at Dabble. Will, I've been talking about Dabble for a very, very long time. We are finally to football season, and Dabble is the place to go for daily fantasy. It is absolutely awesome to get involved in the daily fantasy action. And Dabble has one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space. They've wasted no time making a name for themselves. The social function, it is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, but let's be honest, you're here for college football. You want to do NFL as well. Dabble is a great place for that. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Well, let's start with the Jean Mateer injury news that we got. Sooner Scoop broke this on Tuesday that Mateer broke his thumb in the first quarter against Auburn. He's going to be out a few weeks depending on the recovery. Remarkable that he completed 11 consecutive passes and 15 of his final 16 passes in this one. Toughness personified, Jean Mateer. What can you do with a broken thumb at that high level of a rate? I don't think I can open my fridge at that type of success rate. 15 of 16 with a broken thumb?
I don't think I can complete that many passes in college football 26 in a row if I had a broken thumb.
If you had an open receiver without a defender, could you complete 15 of 16 passes? I don't think so.
In
like
real
10
life?
yards in front of you. Yes, and 10 yards in front of you in real life.
Oh, yeah.
No way.
I'm floating it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just speaks to his toughness and the fact that he beat another top 25 team with a pretty important part of his body. Not exactly, I don't want to say not intact, but not well, we can say. A lot of thoughts on this because in one sense, if he's back for Red River, which is best case scenario, the way that the timeline is looking right now, this could be a lot about nothing. Michael Hawkins Jr., who last year stepped in for Jackson Arnold as a true freshman, and he's the backup. He is going to be getting these opportunities. He's more than capable of stepping in and beating Kent State, which, again, Kent State has not beat an FBS team since 2022. That is basura times 12.
Nick Saban ain't walking through that door.
Buddy, he's not even looking at that door. He's not. They've got the bye, then Kent State, and then Texas. So in one sense, this could end up being okay for Oklahoma. The timing, you don't want to have this happen in the middle of October when that gauntlet that awaits in the second half is just getting rolling. So from that perspective, maybe Oklahoma can dodge a bullet. You could put 2 and 2 together and say that Mateer is going to try like hell to get back out there for that Texas game, which is going to be 2 weeks from Saturday. This is a guy who grew up in that state. He's only been to that game once. As he told us at SEC Media Days, he ended up leaving that game early. I think he left in the third quarter, he said, because he had his high school homecoming dance. Didn't feel too pleased about that, the way that it played out. But
high school homecoming dance is a way bigger part of this job than I thought it was when I took it.
Discussing it, he should be at his high school homecoming dance.
Right, exactly. It's like, why is that our line of deep? Anyway.
Yeah, that's always just discussed. It's just the timing, the way that it works out. Can we pick another fall activity besides high school homecoming dance that they should be at? Something like that. Should be picking pumpkins out with his parents or something. I don't know.
Attending a fall wedding. Anyway,
Yeah, sure. Ditching a fall wedding. As far as the Heisman campaign, which he was the leader in the Heisman odds as of this time yesterday when we're recording this at 11:25 Eastern, his odds dropped considerably. He's 14th now. I looked it up on DraftKings. Yeah, go figure. We're living in a world in which an Indiana quarterback has the best Heisman odds at this point. Pretty wild. Pretty wild.
and one thing really
yeah,
quick that you noted about the Heisman is like if you lose a game, it's over. You know.
it's Charlie Ward is
Mhm.
the only Heisman winner who has ever missed a power conference game in the regular season. It's like that's the context. If you're only playing 11 games, it's really tough. It's really tough to win a Heisman if you're not getting to a conference championship game. Now we saw last year Travis Hunter was able to do that, but it's still one of those things that you're like, man, you need all those games because once you start doing the statistical side by side, that's when you get nitpicked, and it's just really difficult to win the award for the best player in the sport. So like I don't know about all that. Like take those odds dropping for what they are. Maybe it's even going to add to his Heisman lore if he's able to come back against Texas and play well, and we'll
He's
look
gonna
back
walk
at the
out wrapped
Auburn
in the
game.
American flag, and
Right.
he's gonna like fight a bald
Don't
eagle.
do that. Don't do that. That has nothing to do with patriotism whatsoever. That's just you saw Aaron Rodgers do it. You saw what happened to him immediately after he did that and ran out for the start of the season. But don't do that if you're John Mateer. I am interested though. Like if he returns for Texas, Oklahoma is still in a little bit of a tough spot because you're not getting the next few weeks with him as a full participant to be able to get on the same page as those receivers. I'd argue that this offense still needs some of that. As decorated as Mateer has been so far in the first month of the season, I think they can still benefit from having more time together, and they're not going to get that. And here's maybe the bigger thing that I worry about. If Mateer takes a little bit to feel normal with his hand, which I don't know how he's going to come out of this looking. I don't know if this is going to be a Henry Rowan-Gardner situation where all of a sudden his hand is just even better. That's a rookie of the year reference, folks. The natural response for Mateer is going to be to turn to his legs. And it kind of was a lot in this game. Not that much in the Auburn game, but you even saw down the stretch, he looked like he was a little bit more comfortable with his legs. And that's natural for someone with his skill set. I do worry a little bit about how he's going to hold up against that schedule with the type of dual threat abilities that he has. Okay. And I know I've expressed concern about that, but he ain't built like a tank. Okay, this guy ain't built like Lenore Sellers, or he's not built like Will Levis was. Like it's just a little bit more difficult. This specific injury could have happened against anyone, so I'm not saying that his style of play was what led to this. His hand just landed in the wrong spot on a deep throw. It wasn't some unnecessary hit that he took, trying to pick up yards or something like that. But I just think it's a little bit of a tough setback for this Oklahoma offense that was still trying to find its footing against better competition. Maybe Michael Hawkins is going to step in and look the part. I saw what it looked like last year against Texas, though. And let's just say it was advantage Longhorns, advantage our guy PK on the Texas defensive side. Week 4 has just been OU's kryptonite as a member of the SEC. I don't know. I haven't looked at the schedule for next year. They need to make sure that week 4 is a bye next year. Rework the schedule, figure it out. If you got to pay a buyout fee, do it. Worth it.
Greg Sankey is listening, and he is now just scheduled the Philadelphia Eagles in week 4 against Oklahoma. He's like, Oklahoma's having something nice? No.
Yeah. Week 4, this is where your dreams go to die, essentially. I just hope John Mateer comes back soon and that he's not seriously impacted from this, because he's very quickly become one of the must-watch guys in this sport.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I mean, hey, this is going to sound like some copium, but I feel like pretty fair about Oklahoma. I feel like I've been kind of tough on Oklahoma. This is kind of one of the better spots to have this injury, as far as, okay, we got Kent State to prepare.
Could be, yeah.
And like there's kind of a week off in there too. So it's like you at least know what you have by the time the Texas game rolls around. And again, not sunshine pumping, but I would say the offensive coordinator is very different than last year, even with a guy like Michael Hawkins.
Yes.
I hate to say this because this does feel like copium, but not having that guy on tape is actually kind of an advantage for a smart offensive coordinator. If you have no idea who your quarterback is, then that's an advantage for no one. But if you're like, hey, we know what we have. Mateer probably isn't a go against Texas. We'll know that early enough or whatever. Okay, now we actually have the ability to put in new wrinkles with a mobile quarterback. And part of me, for an offense that, again, dirty tricks last week aside, they're creative. Okay, we could say that. I would like to see what they could do with a little bit of a change of pace. So maybe not the worst thing in the world. And then again, Texas, South Carolina has kind of fallen off, but they obviously were ranked and probably will be ranked at another point in the season. And then, so if you would count South Carolina as a ranked team, be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, I don't count. We don't count South Carolina as a ranked team.
No, I'm saying they're not right now, but I'm saying in terms of how they were talked about in the offseason, they still have Sellers, albeit he's hurt.
No, so we don't count them as a ranked team.
Right. I'm just saying they're a quality team. They're not a doormat, right? So you have, let's just call it tough games. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row. There's nowhere to hide after this Kent State /bye. So I think that to kind of get that ability to recharge before that could be helpful for Oklahoma. Now, if you ask me in 4 weeks and it's a disaster over there, then I could feel totally differently. But I don't think this is totally sky is falling just yet.
I do wonder if the timing of it pushed them in the direction to want to have the procedure. Like, I wonder if there was a small part of John Mateer that thought, I could just play through this and nobody will know. And I'll just see if I can play through this. And then maybe the day after or something like that. Because he was doing interviews early in the week. Like, I'm pretty sure he went on with Herb Street and Joey Galloway, their new show that they're doing. And he did not come off as a guy who was nursing an injury. And then all of a sudden this came out on Tuesday that he's going to have this surgery. And this isn't going to be something that you're going to be able to play through. I don't know how many quarterbacks play through a broken thumb on their throwing hand, but that list can't be particularly long. And so there is probably a little bit of OU saying, no, we need to play the long game with this. We're going to need you to be right for the second half of the season. We can't have something like this coming out, or, it's not just a matter of pain tolerance. We need you to be able to throw the football and do all the things that you've been able to do in the first part of this season. We can't have an offense that's particularly limited, because if all of a sudden you can't throw the football and if this keeps getting worse, then you're better off maybe just having Michael Hawkins out there. And I don't mean to discount what John Mateer can do with his legs, because maybe he is ultimately going to be, one of these guys that we look up at the end of the season where, like, he's one of the 3 best running quarterbacks in college football. That seems very much in play given the way that he started. But, I do think that they have looked at this from all those different angles and thought, you know what, let's just do this now. Let's get this over with. Let's hope that you can make a full recovery. I don't know that means playing Texas. I really don't. Like, I think he's going to really try, but I don't know that that's a guarantee that he's going to be able to be back for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, some of that stuff, just to be honest, to try to find that like common thread, I think it comes down to, is a quarterback struggling on how much injury news or if they are injured. So just hear me out here, right? Like, look at DJ Lagway / Garrett Nussmeier, right? As soon as they start kind of struggling, we get these whispers of like, oh, they're actually injured. They're actually injured. This isn't a conspiracy. Just hear me out. I think if they had lost that Auburn game, or if he had looked like bad in that Auburn game, we immediately would have heard that he was injured.
Yep.
We immediately would have heard, oh, he's nursing something, da da da. But to your point, okay, now you're kind of the PR head of the Oklahoma organization. You're still recruiting. It's all sunshine. You just had a big win. So I think some of that stuff comes from coaching. Some of that stuff comes from internal kind of dog in you that we know Mateer has, where it's like, I'm going to wait till the last possible second to, now that I've kind of cleared myself of any, like, I hate to say blame, but it's like, I've done my job. I've pushed the rock up the hill. Now it's going to be on the coaches and everybody else to figure this out. So I'm just going to keep it close to the vest. So I think we have to kind of weigh that. Even like we talked about Ewers last year, where it's like they really just, we knew he was hurt. We were talking about that all year, but until he kind of started struggling, they didn't talk about it. So just something to keep an eye on, that don't trust the quarterback's words when it comes to their own health.
Probably. Yeah. But yeah, definitely a bummer to see a guy leading the Heisman race have a multi-week injury. Not ideal, to say the least. All right, well, headliner game that we've been looking forward to for a while. Number 17 Alabama against number 5 Georgia. Georgia's a 3-point favorite. I think it's fair to say we've been looking forward to this one since the last one ended. It's always must-see TV. I know there are people maybe nationally that are sick of these teams playing, but the over-under I have is 2.5 reminders that these teams haven't played in Athens in 10 years. It's wild. I don't think the average college football fan realizes that. It is truly bizarre that the scheduling gods, all of which want Alabama to do really well, according to Georgia fans that you'll talk to. It's wild that the scheduling gods have given us this much Alabama, Georgia, and so little football of them in Athens. None of their last 7 meetings have been in Athens. 4 in Atlanta, 2 in Tuscaloosa, 1 in Indianapolis. That's right. These teams have played in Indiana more recently than they have played in Athens. I was there. It was electric. It was absolutely awesome. This should be plenty electric as well. It's going to be a fantastic atmosphere, a blackout, which is an odd choice by Georgia, given the history of a certain 2008 blackout in Athens that did indeed turn into a funeral, as Scott Cochran predicted. Don't know that the vibes there totally connect, but no matter what color is most prevalent for Georgia, this is going to be an extremely hostile atmosphere for Alabama, an Alabama team that has not exactly handled extremely hostile atmospheres very well under Kalen DeBoer. Before I get to some historical numbers here, just know this, that if you're betting on this game, bet responsibly. If you are picking a winner, you want to sound smart talking to your friends, whatever side you land on, just know that whatever side wins, you're going to end up feeling dumb for thinking one thing mattered more than the other, okay? Because a lot of things you could point to and say, why'd you assume that wasn't going to win out? Or why'd you assume that? This is why we're explaining all this, okay?
Yeah, and it feels like every one of these matchups has kind of felt this way, where it's like, a couple of them in a row, it's like, how could you ever doubt Alabama or Saban? But there's always that reason. It's like Saban is no longer here. There's now DeBoer, but it's at home for Alabama. And so it's the classic like truth serum game where, to your point, in 2-3 weeks, we're going to look back and say, duh, that was the result, no matter what the result was. Even if it was like a blowout win for Georgia, it's like, well, yeah, this was going to happen. Very similar to Texas, Georgia last year. It's like, yeah, when you think about it in retrospect, I guess that did make a lot of sense, even if it didn't ahead of the game, right?
We'll just get on the Sunday pod and we'll talk like we could have seen this coming a mile away. This was obvious, Will. We're so dumb. We're so dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it matters that Alabama is 2-5 away from Tuscaloosa under Kalen DeBoer. Maybe it matters that Georgia hasn't lost a home night game since 2009, the Barack Obama administration. Maybe it matters that Kirby Smart is 1-6.
Obama too. That was still hope and change level. We didn't even have any of the second. Yeah,
this is true. Yeah, Kirby Smart technically coached in the Barack Obama administration. Yeah, because 2016, first part of it. Yeah. Maybe it matters that Kirby Smart is 1-6 against Alabama and 107-13 against everyone else. Maybe it matters that Kalen DeBoer is 6-1 against AP top 10 teams. Maybe it matters that Kirby Smart hasn't lost any game in Sanford Stadium in the 2020s. Maybe it matters that Kalen DeBoer is 2-0 in his only true road games against AP top 10 teams in his career. Maybe it matters that these two teams played in a game last year that felt like they were entirely different teams from half to half. I don't know. I do know that we will play the results based on what happens with these teams. I also know this spread is only 3 points because the biggest mismatch in this game favors Alabama. At least on paper, it does. And maybe we'll look at the results and say, why did we assume that Georgia wasn't going to be able to figure out its issues in the secondary? But Alabama's receivers against Georgia's secondary feels like the area that the Tide have to exploit, much like we saw last year when Ryan Williams went nuclear. That feels like the plan you have to run back if you're Kalen DeBoer, taking advantage of those matchups.
There is something about a Georgia DB, and I don't know what it is, but they just look particularly, I don't know, appetizing at a defensive highlight. I don't know why. Maybe it's how proper they look in kind of the white uniforms. But you look back at those highlights, it's like, wow, this is rough. Like the way that, honestly, that game meant so much more for Alabama last year than it did for Georgia, because look at how it mythologized Ryan Williams, right? And you talked about it, how down the stretch he wasn't exactly the player that he was built up to be. But when you have, again, hard to, like, I know hyperbole is hard to do with Nick Saban, but to me, that was the most electric play of Bama that I think I've seen. When you think about Bama getting down, when you think about how, like, the stakes of that game and the actual individual play that was made by Ryan Williams at the point, like, the down distance, all that. But that being said, I think the key to this is your boy Jeremy Bernard, right? Because last year we talked about Alabama's not having that second receiver, and it's almost like that's the part that's progressed the most out of Alabama.
Was the Ryan Williams catch more electric than 2nd and 26? Probably not.
The result, that's the thing. The result of 2nd and 26 is a championship. You talk about the backup quarterback, but the actual play, the individual play, it just kept going. It was like a 2-minute highlight. Like there was like new Georgia guys spawning out of a portal and getting thrown into the ground. It was crazy.
It's probably the better play to rewatch a clip of on the internet. Yeah.
Like that was just honestly good reading of coverage.
Yeah,
as in the championship game. Whereas like that was like
fair,
an individual, like that shouldn't have happened by Ryan Williams.
fair. I think Georgia. There were plenty of Georgia fans that felt fortunate to survive the Tennessee game with how much the secondary struggled. I think you can look at that and go, well, that should be corrected in the bye week. How much of that? I don't know. And how much of that is just who Georgia's going to be this year, especially in a post Malachi Starks world. Like that could be what it looks like a lot of times on the back end. And maybe they don't have the answers in the secondary. You do have Kirby Smart, the best person ideally that can figure those things out. I'm asking a lot of questions that I don't truly know the answers to. And that's not the best way to do a game breakdown, especially for a big game breakdown like this one. But look, I'm admitting to you, I don't know how much beating up on a Wisconsin team matters when that Wisconsin team a week later has fire fickle chance Phil Camp Randall after getting walloped by Maryland. Like, I don't know what type of workload to expect from Jam Miller in his first game of the season, even though Ty Simpson said that he practiced like a wild man. I don't know if the same will be true of Tim Keenan on that defensive line for Alabama. And all of a sudden, this Alabama is just going to have much more success against Georgia's run game compared to what they looked like against Florida State. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I don't even know if we will know in the final 2 minutes of this game who is going to win. I don't know all of these things, but I don't think Georgia walks off that field without a win. I think Georgia finds a way, Will. I think they do. It ain't pretty defensively for Georgia. They're still going to have moments in the secondary where they get gashed. But I think Georgia puts together a late drive to pull out a 30-28 thriller. And Gunnar Stockton, once again, does very Stetson Bennett the fifth. Yeah, that's Stetson Bennett the fifth, not the fourth. Stetson Bennett the fifth things down the stretch to join him in the I Beat Bama Club, which consists of one Kirby Smart era Georgia quarterback, Stetson Bennett.
Yes, I guess that's how the Stetson Bennett name. It's like there's a council, kind of like the Heisman House, and you have to be bestowed the name Stetson Bennett from killing a large deer or a lion or something, or beating Alabama.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the hunting thing. Gunnar Stockton
He's done
would not
that.
have been able to get Stetson Bennett the fifth. That would have been Brock Vandegrift who would have been able to get that.
That's why they
So,
got to be a little bit more stringent. Now it's about being
true.
Bama, exactly. So talking about these Kirby Smart DBs, it's interesting because it feels like the time between these conversations has gotten shorter, right? Because I could go all the way back to, the SEC championship game against LSU, where one Garrett Nussmeier comes in and kind of plays well in the second half. Not enough for it to matter, obviously. Georgia was obviously a way better team than LSU. But I remember the visuals of Kirby Smart screaming at his defensive backs and us going, this is kind of weird. Like, why is this happening? And then it doesn't matter. They kind of tighten up and obviously go on to win.
But they didn't tighten up immediately after that. Ohio State had their way with them, and CJ Stroud was masterful in that playoff game that obviously they needed a Stetson Bennett-like comeback to be able to survive what was a really tough day at the office for their secondary again.
Yeah, and like that's kind of what's interesting about people in our profession is like I don't want to overweigh a win or a result because at the end of the day you're so right. Whereas those DBs didn't actually improve, therefore resulting in a win. It was that they kind of won in spite of that. That's a really good point. And so again, last year there were points where we're like these Georgia DB, like what is going on? Like Mississippi State was a good example, and then again going into the Texas game, it's like, look at this offense, look at Steve Sarkisian, and then suddenly they tighten up and become, again, the Philadelphia Eagles, the 85 Bears out of nowhere. And so there are times when, again, you feel so ridiculous questioning, what is arguably the best, or at least one of the best defensive back coaches of our generation of all time, and Kirby Smart, who has developed all these people, not just at Georgia, but at Alabama, former defensive back for Georgia himself. It's like, you simpleton, this is the god of defensive backs. How could you ever question this when you see a result like the Texas games, when you see that like these great offenses are put in a locker by Georgia? But then these signs just keep showing their heads. Again, the Alabama game was an example last year of, like not great play in a matchup where Alabama looked so unstoppable. And then after that, their season really came off the rails because their offense never looked the same again. And so you could talk about maybe they, spent too much of their resource on one game and they showed too many good plays, whatever it would be. But that being said, there has to come a point where either Georgia adjusts and they are just consistently a great defense week in and week out that does not make mental lapses, penalties, blown coverages, or we have the right to keep asking these questions, especially with the progression of Alabama's receiver room. And again, we could talk about they lost to Florida State. That's very true. I get that. I don't think that we could make jokes about Mike Bobo, but he just had a masterclass, and Gus Malzahn certainly wasn't at the top of his game when he smoked Alabama. So I say all that to say it really is about trends in these games, because I hate to say the same thing again, but it's like either way you feel kind of like you're vindicated, right? And so I will say I've picked Georgia in enough of these games to know what it's like to feel silly. But I feel like at some point, Kirby Smart has to get over this hump. I think that Gunnar Stockton showed enough against what is, I think, a pretty good Tennessee defense, right? And so I'll go ahead with you and pick Georgia here. But let me ask you this question: how do you feel like Gunnar Stockton is against the blitz this year?
I can look up those numbers for you in just a second. What I will say, and this speaks to this point. Let me get those numbers on PFF real quick. Both of these teams desperately want game records to emerge. They are searching for those answers right now. It was a question that we had about Alabama coming into this season. It's a question that is played out in the first part of this season. And they are searching for those guys. Like you talk about how Georgia was able to figure things out against Texas last year. One of the reasons that they figured that out was because they got their game records to step up in those moments. And you saw what it did for that secondary. Like they all of a sudden, they were teeing off. Like Jalen Walker in that Texas game last year, you're just like, who's blocking that guy? Because it ain't Kelvin Banks, an All-American left tackle. It ain't anybody on that decorated Texas offensive line. And both of these teams are searching for those guys because I do think they need help on the back end. Alabama secondary came in a lot more decorated. Alabama was, I think PFF had Alabama as the number one secondary in college football coming into the season. And it's still really difficult to look that good if you don't have guys that pressure the quarterback. Let me be the first to say. So like there is that element of this that I think is really important. You wanted those numbers of Gunnar Stockton against the blitz. This year, when he has been blitzed, and by the way, he's been blitzed on 43% of his dropbacks, which is pretty high rate. I mean, that's almost 50-50.
That's a little bit of he can't shoot. You know what I'm saying? That's a little bit of we think this guy can't beat us against the blitz, which we saw against Tennessee. He could.
He's actually averaging 10.6 yards per attempt against the blitz, though, which is solid. Like that's really good. And that speaks to what we saw play out in that Tennessee game where he's taking some hits, man. He's taking some hits and delivering on-target throws. I think that's an early box that he's checked, is being able to handle that in ways that I don't know that he was checking that box at the end of last season, even when he was able to have the comeback against Texas in the SEC championship. And obviously the mostly rough day at the office against Notre Dame. When he's not been blitzed this year, he's averaging 6.2 yards per attempt. Adjusted completion percentage of 78.3. But against the blitz, Gunnar Stockton this year is completing 89% of his passes. Adjusted completion percentage that factors in for the one drop that he's had in those situations.
So that's fascinating.
Pretty good.
And great job looking that up as quickly. I didn't mean to just drop that on you, but this is the stat here, right? Because to me that says, as a defensive coordinator, you don't really respect this guy, right? Because the great quarterbacks, the Bryce Youngs, the Joe Burrows, you're not going to send pressure on them.
Throw a lot at them.
They're going to see that hot read. They're going to see who's open immediately when they identify the mic. But a younger guy like Gunnar Stockton, who doesn't have the reps, you're going to want to get him off of his spot and make him really read the defense. And thus far, to your point, it looks like that's been a pretty bad strategy. We talked about Tennessee has had a pretty sound defense. Their numbers have actually been pretty good, kind of outside of this game and the things that you can measure individually from their defenders. But I mean, look at the 4th and 6 play, right? Where it's like, you need to make this exact throw and you make it. You don't have a lot of options on that play, but this is what it says. So that being said, Kane Womack has been one of these blitzing D coordinators who has, exactly to your point, created game records to where things are easier. So whenever the Bama defenses look great, it's because guys are holding up in one-on-one coverage and the blitz is getting home. Well, Mike Bobo, got to give him credit. That's a game plan right there, that you're swinging the ball, you're getting outside, you're getting the ball in your playmaker's hands against the blitz. So I think it's a really key to look at in this game, whereas Kane's going to want to get home and Mike Bobo is going to want to swing the ball out wide in response to that.
Georgia's got to also figure out, the quick passing game is going to be there because I think Georgia knows the right side of its offensive line has not been particularly good this year, really struggled in that Tennessee game, and they need to figure out that part of it because obviously you don't want guys, like even though Alabama's searching for those game records, you don't want those guys just in Gunnar Stockton's face all the time. Like that, you can be good against pressure, you can be good against the blitz. That's still an area of weakness that you would like to have your quarterback avoid, is taking as many shots like that. But it is going to be a really interesting chess match between Bobo and between Kane Womack, and who's able to ultimately prevail. I think there will be a lot of moments in this game in which it feels like both coordinators are getting cooked. You're like, what are they doing? They're getting picked apart here. They're getting picked apart there. I expect this to be a back and forth game. I really do. Like, I think we get several lead changes in it. I think there was a part of me that wanted to pick Bama to win a game like this on the road, because it's not that their only road wins have been against bad teams, because obviously last year Alabama went into LSU and won a game that LSU would have been desperate to win, and Bama was clearly the better team. A very different Alabama team this is, but I do
Another
think that we're in
funny
for a good
Kalen
one.
DeBoer stat where it's like that's Brian Kelly's only home night loss. It's like at the time it would
Right?
have made all the sense in the world for them to win that game. They got blown out. It's very stark with Kalen DeBoer, I will say.
Yeah, I will say, like, whichever quarterback comes out as the winner in this game, Ty Simpson or Gunnar Stockton, might be an interesting thing if you're betting on the Heisman, to just float a little bit of action on both of those guys. I realize their odds have since improved after quiet starts, but whoever comes out of this game victorious, like the quarterback, will be saying like, wow, they've arrived. We said that about Gunnar Stockton after the Tennessee game in a lot of different ways. And I even think if he loses in this game, it's not going to be like, oh, see, he's not going to be up to the challenge of being QB1 for Kirby Smart. But I do think whatever quarterback wins this game will be saying like, dang, they really looked the part. What a big time atmosphere to be able to show up in. And we'll have a lot of very nice things to say about them.
Yeah, and I think about being like a household name too, getting talked about with the Stephen A's on the get ups and stuff like that. Georgia,
Right.
Alabama has that level of rivalry where unfortunately Tennessee, Georgia kind of does it at this point. Bama has been that team, Georgia has been that team. These are multiple national champions. So yeah, I think this is the proving ground that Kirby Smart has struggled with. And I think that this year you got to like your guys, you got to like that you have a little bit more history. And if not now, win. We keep saying it, but eventually they got to win this one.
I love how that's the ultimate barometer of whether or not you become a household name, is if Stephen A can rattle off who you are on first take.
It's sad, but it's true,
what
man.
Are we doing?
He's got like a Kimmel take and everything now. It's so unfortunate everything has been commodified, but the ball knowers know about Tennessee and they know about Josh Heupel, but kind of the more national guys where your Heisman buzz comes from in the narrative, yeah.
This is true. All right, well, number 22, Notre Dame, 4.5-point favorites against Arkansas. The over-under is 140 quarterback rating for Taylen Green. That is what Notre Dame allowed in each of its first 3 games this year.
Mm-hmm.
They had 2 such games all of last year. 3 games already this year in which they are off to a 1-2 starts. Taylen Green had 2 such games with a 140 quarterback rating against ranked foes last year, already won this year. This could very easily be another. This is the guy who is leading FBS in scrimmage yards per game. Taylen Green has not been perfect, but the 4 local quarterback, when he hits right, he hits and he gets big time chunk plays. Like that's not going to be in doubt. The actual over under for this game, Will, is 64.5. That is high. I think that's highest in FBS this week. That is because neither of these defenses have been particularly good against power conference competition. It's been a rough go. Who can get the most stops, particularly in the second half? I don't know what a first half lead really amounts to in this one. Is it going to be the defense facing the 4 local quarterback, or is it going to be the defense facing Jeremiah Love, a week removed from allowing 290 rushing yards to Memphis? I'd say advantage Notre Dame there. It's still Marcus Freeman, Like I tend to think that matters at some point. I don't know. As frustrated as Arkansas fans are that this is a noon kickoff on ABC, that's been a very major point of contention for Arkansas fans since that was announced over the summer. This sort of has
good news. These teams are now 3-4. So hey, you saw the noon kickoff coming and you just sucked to the occasion, teams.
Arkansas fans, you don't want to hear this. I'm telling you, you don't want to hear this. You're kind of the perfect noon game. You kind of are. Back and forth plays that have Joe Test just losing his mind. I'm just assuming Joe Test is going to be on the call for this. I haven't even looked that up, but he was on the call last week for the Memphis game too. Taylen Green and Jeremiah Love just trying to hurdle dudes left and right. who will hurdle more dudes in this game? Jeremiah Love, who's addicted to hurdling, or Taylor Green? I don't know. Maybe both are going to have multiple. I hope. I try to let people know, because we're adults. We have lives. We have things going on. I try to let people know on this show that as much as I love this sport, there are certain noon slates in which it's a good time to be able to build up some of that credibility you need within your household so that you can lock into college football for the rest of the day. And you say like, I don't need to watch, the first part of the noon games. Like, let's go out. Let's get some mulch. It's, we need to get some fertilizer for the weekend. Whatever. Do your productive fall thing that you need to be able to get done. Somebody out there is listening to this going, Connor, you idiot, you don't fertilize in the fall. What are you talking about?
Come on.
I try to let the people know. Okay. I do. This is not a noon slate you should skip. You should be watching this start to finish. Okay. Get your credit back somewhere else. Do something extra nice on Friday night. Maybe miss some of those NFL games on Sunday. Don't miss this noon slate. It's going to be good. Watch this. If you got the YouTube multi-view, get USC Illinois on the other game that feels really important for Lincoln Riley as he's trying to keep USC in playoff contention. This game should be a lot of fun. It should be based on the strengths and weaknesses that we've seen for both of these teams. The problem for Arkansas, and I'm not breaking news by saying this, you just can't trust this team to win competitive games. If there is a window that's open,
you're saying that so politely, but it's such a fundamentally sad thing to be true, where it's like, if this game's in doubt, start doubting.
If this game is within 14 in the fourth quarter, assume it's not going to go Arkansas's way.
Yep.
Just assume that. At this point, wait for that back-breaking fumble. Wait for Arkansas to have 12 men on the field coming out of a timeout. Wait for Arkansas to have a procedural penalty of some ridiculous magnitude. Wait for them to get a leap, a leveraged leaping penalty. What are they calling it these days on field goals? I don't even remember.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to do something like that. That's going to be a key thing in this game, and Arkansas is going to find a way to not win. Okay?
Yeah. And I mean, hey, this is really weakness on weakness across the ball, because you have Marcus Freeman, who famously lines up 10 people on defense, and then you have
one time. And the game didn't even matter that much,
You lose
right?
one game against Ohio State on national television, and Lou Holtz is there, and suddenly that's your whole identity until you have your backup quarterback who played lacrosse come back and mess up a PAT. Anyway, yeah,
too soon.
This is a procedural nightmare for a football purist. You're so right about that. I mean, both of these teams have had just absurd things go wrong with them on offense, defense, and special teams. You could talk about losing the freaky fumble for Arkansas last week. You could talk about just leaving that dude wide open to score the longest touchdown, maybe second to the Ryan Williams play in total time that I've seen, where I'm like, this guy's going to keep running and no one's going to catch him. So every play, you're so right, is a chance for a beautiful disaster, a happy accident, as Bob Ross used to call it. And I'm excited. I think it's a perfect way. The kegs and eggs thing, the SEC can kind of take that over and just put Taylor Green at noon every day to really just get your day going.
The thing about Four Loko, for those who have ever experienced this, I don't think I've ever actually consumed a full Four Loko. And I was in college when Four Loko got going, and it was really big. And then the FDA stepped in and said, maybe not. But I remember my buddies who had multiple Four Lokos. They don't remember it, but I remember.
That's the thing. You never remember finishing a Four Loko. You may finish it or not, but you stop, at some point throughout. And really quick, I saw this record in one-score games here. Sam Pittman.
Oh, I know all of them, Will. It's 2-10 since the start of 2023. It's 4-14 since the start of 2022 for Sam Pittman.
Well, there you go. Just want to say Brian Kelly is 8-3 in such games, number one in the SEC.
No, to make everything about LSU. Look at you.
I'm just saying. People talk about scared money don't make money. Anyway, so point being, and of course, funny enough, Hugh Freeze is actually kind of down there with Sam Pittman. But yeah, definitely a statement game. And again, I'm imagining Bobby Petrino right now at practice. What do you think an Arkansas practice is like right now, Connor?
Well, I just can't get that image. I know I brought this up on the Sunday pod. I just feel like Bobby Petrino, who I think it was, I don't remember who reported this. It might have been Pete Nakos for On 3, that Bobby Petrino is very much interested in the interim job, if there is an interim job to be had. And it is Dwight showing up at the office with a gun.
Yes. It's so classically, it's like, who's running back coughed up the football? Whose quarterback threw those horrible picks? Not me. I'm just the offensive coordinator.
This game is going to have some some drive that feels like Arkansas has gotten over the hump, long touchdown drive. Look at Taylon Green, big time moment. And then like within 8 seconds, you're going to realize that Jadarian Price returned a kickoff for a touchdown for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's going to find a way to win this one. I have Notre Dame winning 45-38. Awesome noon game. And I say awesome from a entertainment standpoint and not so much from an Arkansas torture standpoint, because at this point, Arkansas fans, torture is inevitable.
Yeah. So you have this overhitting, despite it being.
I have a lot of overs hitting this week. Will.
Oh, heck
I
yeah.
have not been on the over train. I've been very much on the under train. I think a lot of that changes this week.
Yes. Did you see kind of the Zapruder film of CJ Carr tipping his RPOs as well?
Oh, I did not see this.
Oh,
I love a good like all 22 breakdown of, oh my God, you might be doing something really, really stupid here.
Oh yes.
CJ Carr's a new starter. He can work through something like that. I assume that'll be figured out.
Yes. Basically what they showed is in the A&M game during an RPO, right? Whenever he was going to drop back and pass, or whatever he pre-read that he was going to pass the ball, he was already kind of preset in his passing stance with his back foot already back. Whereas if he was going to hand the ball off, his feet were kind of parallel, i.e. to hand the ball off more regularly. And the way I saw it was an A&M fan quote tweeted and said, respectfully, they still got up and down the field on us over and over and over again. So even if our coaches saw this,
points.
I got big problems with this.
Yeah. It's like, Notre Dame's offense is good.
I gotta give that specific A&M fan credit, because it's like, well, either our coaching staff didn't see this and they're stupid, or they did and it didn't matter. It was just a very funny way to take that. So that being said, we really have just such a high chaotic potential here. I actually think Arkansas is at least going to. I don't think Notre Dame is going to cover. I think they'll get within the spread here. It's hard for me to pick Arkansas, but I just feel like, man, I love Taylon Green so much, and I think that fundamentally, you know what? I'm gonna go chaos. I say Arkansas win this one. Whatever. You know,
right?
Because at the end of the day, it's gonna be way more fun, and I like Arkansas's offense better. And I have no reason to root for Notre Dame's defense. It's not like I have anything to really hang my hat on to say they're so great at anything. Let's do it. I think they beat A&M. Or I think A&M would beat them.
The thing that kind of sucks though for Arkansas is if they win this game, then Notre Dame drops to 1-3, and Notre Dame's out like 100% out of the playoff picture. There are still people that think Notre Dame can get in at 10-2.
The funniest outcome is Sam Pittman wins by like 10 points, and then it's like, well, it's a no-score game, and this team's 1-3. They're not any good. It doesn't matter.
That would be That would be immediately take credit away from Arkansas, that type of game, and that's pretty much where Arkansas is at this point. Maybe you could argue Arkansas, that this is a place Arkansas has been at for ever. I don't know. John Neighbors can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it feels very much like Arkansas has been at this place pretty much forever.
Give me Mike Bobby Petrino. Give me Bobby Petrino with the bow tie, slick back hair, ready for the job interview. Let's do it. I'm going all in.
How much money would you pay for the footage? And I'm not saying we don't bury people until they've died.
But how much money?
What a preamble. How much money would you pay for the unedited footage of a Bobby Petrino job interview for the head coaching job at Arkansas? I think I'd pay $500. Is that too much? That's too much.
I'm right there with you, man. Because at the end of the day, you don't know if he's gonna come in and do like the hey, you need me, like kind of just like hey, like
with a holster,
like basically just put it on the table and be like, hey, exactly, like you have no better option than me. Good luck. Or if he's gonna do the binder and the slide deck and have, I don't know if they let him have interns anymore, but have one of his interns do a binder or something that he can come in and present. But you're right. It could go lots of ways. I think he's a good shot at the job, unfortunately. Well, fortunately for us, who cares?
Shows up in a neck brace and then takes it off to show how much he's learned. See, I'm good now. I'm a different man. I'm a changed man.
There's a choir in the background. Yeah, that was fire.
Good Lord. All right, Auburn. Number 9, Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a 6.5-point favorite. The over-under I have is 148 receiving yards for Mario Craver. That's what he's averaging. Pretty darn good for the A&M receiver, the Mississippi State transfer. He leads power conference receivers in receiving, even though he's only played 3 games, and pretty much everyone else has played 4. Yeah. If there's a weakness in the Auburn defense, it is the secondary. John Mateer had a broken thumb. We just talked about it. And he still completed 11 consecutive passes against that unit.
When you really put that in perspective, it's like, yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? Like statistically, it may have not looked great, but then when you factor in that the dude couldn't feel his hand.
Yeah. Sawyer Robertson had more passing yards than anybody in FBS week 1 against that Auburn secondary. A lot of running room for Michael Trigg against Auburn. Auburn might be the single most pressure dependent unit in the SEC right now. Sometimes that's going to make them look really darn good because there are certain quarterbacks that are going to struggle to buy time and they're going to be very overwhelmed by the likes of Crawford and Falk. We're going to keep talking about those guys.
But is Marcel Reed one of these quarterbacks, Connor?
Exactly, Will. Exactly. I don't think Marcel Reed will struggle to buy time. I do think Reed is improved, but the area where he continues to struggle is throwing against pressure. When he's been under pressure this year, he's averaging 3.6 yards per pass attempt. The problem is that he's only been under pressure on 26% of his dropbacks because that A&M offensive line is solid. He can also scramble. He's got 91 yards on 14 scrambles this year. And while you can spy him, that's one defender that you're removing from coverage against a group of pass catchers that are establishing themselves as some of the best in college football with Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion. Those guys have been awesome so far. We also just kind of saw the training wheels come off of Le'Veon Moss in that Notre Dame game. He had the bye week to get fresh legs even more so going into this one. What I am trying to say is that A&M's offense has been extremely difficult to defend against. And I think that there are going to be a lot of SEC teams that are going to struggle to shut them down because of all the different ways that they can beat you over the course of 60 minutes. They've been very, very versatile so far, and I think that's going to continue. I think it continues against Auburn. I like the over a lot in these games this week. I mentioned that before. The over-under for this one's 52.5. I'd be taking the over on this. I think A&M wins a 35-24 game, an Auburn streak of 8 consecutive losses to ranked teams in true road games continues.
Yeah, I'm loving the over in this one for sure. I really just wish I could pick Auburn in this one. We've already seen Auburn win this one, but a little bit different as far as, the location of the game and everything like that. I think that A&M might be a little bit higher, or might be a little bit too high right now, but I just don't think Auburn's a team that can expose that, especially given kind of what we've seen out of them lately. The caliber of athlete on A&M is just a little bit better than Auburn, and sometimes that's what Auburn does end up falling back on. If their game plan isn't great, whenever you've seen them compete in these games, it's like, they still got some dudes in a couple of like key places. And to your point, like, their pass rush or their ability to get pressure has been great, especially like we talked about this with Dylan Stewart at South Carolina, where Keldrick Falk hasn't exactly been like the exact focal point, but the other guys have gotten through because offensive lines have.
He's still so disruptive though with like the batted passes and stuff. Even when he's not getting home, he makes a big time difference.
Exactly. And you have to do so much to stop him where it's like statistically he doesn't exactly show up, but then everybody else is eating, and it's like that you kind of have to pick your poison, and you'd rather one guy beat you, honestly, than have everybody else getting through. And you can see that the whole offensive line's kind of eating for Auburn. So, yeah, I think that there are going to be some very questionable passes in this game, I think we can say. There are going to be some, maybe not ducks, but balls going to no one in particular. But I do think that A&M's balance is what I like better, to say it that way. The balance of Auburn is simply just, is their quarterback going to run the ball or is their quarterback going to throw the ball? With A&M, at least they have a couple of sources for that. Great receiver matchup. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, could end up being multiple all SEC receivers playing in this game. Cam Coleman, what he showed in that Oklahoma game is he is capable of being a cheat code. Like Cam Coleman's the real deal. They haven't even really gotten Eric Singleton going yet. I know he was banged up coming into the season, but it is a great receiver matchup with the guy and two quarterbacks who really need that. And I think they're going to rely on that a lot. Like Jackson Arnold struggled to be able to obviously stay upright in that game against Oklahoma. Not sure if you heard, but 10 sacks in that one. And having the ability to look at something line of scrimmage and go, I've got Cam Coleman on this guy. Beneficial. Very, very beneficial, and could allow them to put up some points in this one. But it's tough to see how much Auburn's offensive line struggled last week and then to pick them to all of a sudden go on the road and beat a top 10 team.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if I said these are the two, I don't think these are the two best receiving cores because Coleman's that guy, but and Singleton's solid, but I think A&M truly has two number ones. That's actually kind of what Auburn had last year, but they couldn't capitalize it. It's the classic, like, what if I told you these receivers run these teams and you'd go, surely they have dynamic passing offenses. And it's like, well, actually their quarterbacks just rely on these guys to make amazing one-on-one plays because their legs are so scary. And so, I do think just overall, these teams are kind of versions of each other. But A&M's just a better version. I like A&M here, especially not on the voodoo magic of the Plains.
History is not on Auburn's side in this one. And I realize Auburn is just outside of the AP Top 25. Mike Elko doesn't lose these games. He doesn't. His last time losing a home game to an unranked team was year one at Duke in 2022, and Drake May threw a game-winning touchdown pass for UNC and with 16 seconds left. Also, Auburn has 14 consecutive losses to AP top 10 teams in true road games, with only 3 of them decided by one score. This has not been a good spot for Auburn in the past. And we've talked about A&M's road woes, which have since looked like they've been corrected under Mike Elko, but at home, they've been a constant. I mean, they just have always been able to show up at Kyle Field and look the part. So I do think that while I agree with you, I think there are other areas later in the season that A&M could be like, you know what? Maybe they're not a top 10 type quality team. I don't think this is necessarily the week in which that comes out.
Yes, and just I need to hold myself accountable for actually saying something and picking these games. I'm going to take A&M to cover 6.5 and the over on this one.
Yeah, a lot of overs this week. A lot of overs on this week. All right, Kentucky, South Carolina. South Carolina is a 6.5 point favorite. The over-under I have is 1 reference to climate versus culture. Yeah. Mark Stoops hates South Carolina. It doesn't matter who's coaching there.
Mark Stoops hates plenty of things, Beamer. To be honest. Just get in line for Mark Stoops' hatred.
South Carolina is pretty high up on that list. I can assure you of that. But
the forward pass also on that list.
Yeah, it's not that he hates the forward pass. It's that he struggles when it looks so poorly. And I think it drives him up a wall. Mm-hmm. And Kentucky's had far too many moments of that in the last few years in which the forward pass has driven Mark Stoops up a wall. We saw in the Netflix doc, Beamer has this glass drawing board, which College Town, by the way, Columbia, shameless plug, Saturday Down South on YouTube. Check that out. Really, really cool stuff. Columbia got to sit down. Our guy Wes Blankenship got to sit down with Shane Beamer. Hopefully, we'll have Wes on to be able to talk about that soon. And you could see the glass, in the background, this drawing board or whatever. And so Shane Beamer was showing this off in Any Given Saturday, and on the chair is the T-shirt that read "Culture greater than sign climate," with culture in garnet and climate in blue. And let's just call it what it is. These teams, these coaches, they don't like each other at all. Good. They shouldn't. They're very different people. It's okay that they don't like each other. I don't know why they really hide from it, but nonetheless, I don't like watching Kentucky play football very much these days. But
that should be tax deductible, I feel, in your profession. It's like the time that I've spent watching Kentucky's offense, I should be compensated,
It's charity. It's charity to watch Kentucky football. At least on offense.
On offense. Their defense has been okay.
And we'll say the Kentucky passing game, because their 1-2 punch in the backfield, which I'm going to get to in a second here, is good. And it could be one of the better 1-2 backfield punches in the SEC. But the problem is the limiting factors in the passing game. Whether that continues with Cutter Boley in his first SEC road start, that remains to be seen. Let's just say it can't get worse than what we saw under Zach Calzada will. This was the game last year that we realized South Carolina had a special defense. Dylan Stewart was shredding triple teams. I would suggest triple teaming Dylan Stewart again, because that might be the only way that Cutter Boley gets enough time to stretch the field. And stretching the field with Zach Calzada and the Kentucky offense this year, I don't know if the average person, or even if the most diehard Kentucky fan, realizes how bad the numbers were. And this is not a Kentucky offense that faced this gauntlet schedule. Okay. And I realize Cutter Boley started against Eastern Michigan, so we're only talking about those first 3 games here. Or I guess, first 3 games, first 2 games, whatever. Zach Calzada was 3 for 22 on passes 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, which is almost impossible, Will. 3 for 22 on passes 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. DJ Lagway and Arch Manning have been criticized, very rightfully so, for their accuracy issues this season. Lagway is 16 for 37 on those throws, and Arch is 22 for 46. And those are the inaccurate guys. 3 for 22.
That is a level of horrible. And I mean, think about the age difference of these people. Not to make a joke out of it, I was going to say, just give the guy a couple more years. But it's like, brother, again, riding lawnmower territory. Like he knows all about fertilizing in the autumn times. Like you aren't going to get better than that. I understand making the switch, but it's like, man, I again on last pod was like they gotta push the ball down the field at Florida. It's like at Kentucky, it's like they're not trying and it's not working. It's impressive actually that they're that much worse than everyone else.
So bad. 3 for 22 is inexplicable. It's like
Against lesser competition. To your point, it's not like they're playing, the Alabamas and the Georgias right now. It's like this is when you should be really inflating your stats, and they'll come down later in the year.
yeah, and I think he only had one drop in those, so the adjusted completion percentage is a tiny bit better. But oh my gosh, I mean, it was just hard to watch. If you're Kentucky, you are hoping and praying that you can follow the Mizzou game plan against South Carolina. Lean on that ground game. Hope that a new look South Carolina front seven, which has had some issues so far, hope that it can't shed blocks. And then you turn in this rushing performance in which you look up and you're like, oh my God, we had 250 rushing yards. McGowan and Dowdell, who have been really good for Kentucky so far, like those guys are hopefully going to be the driving force behind a low scoring victory. I don't know that everyone can just replicate what Mizzou has on offense. We sung their praises on Sunday. I feel really good about what they had been able to show. And I don't know that Kentucky can just automatically copy that game plan as much as they would like to.
But hey, now
I
it's
do.
time to say one nice thing about Kentucky. If any team in the SEC can just lean forward and run the ball, Kentucky can do it. Now, the threat of Bo Perbula makes some of that possible. Maybe the talent level is a little bit different at Mizzou, but at least they have the commitment and the scheme to run the ball.
They have guys that can run through contact, which is good. Um, Seth McGowan's a really nice player. He's a really nice player, and he's not going to be one of these guys. If Kentucky ends up 4-8 this season, he's not going to be one of these guys that's talked about nationally or anything like that. And he could be one of these guys that has just an all SEC worthy season that does not get any attention whatsoever. Um, I think that if you're trying to find what's the most inevitable thing in this game, I can't picture South Carolina starting off SEC play 0-3 with losses to Vandy, Mizzou, and Kentucky. We could talk about South Carolina not being able to live up to the preseason hype and not being able to pick up where they left off last year. But 0-3 to start SEC play against those teams, I don't think Shane Beamer allows that to happen. They find a way to win 21-17. So Kentucky covers the 6.5 point spread, but South Carolina wins a low scoring, grind it out sort of game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that honestly, if South Carolina doesn't cover, they're in massive trouble to me. To your point, this is a game that they roundly, controlled last year after struggling against Old Dominion and being like, okay, now we actually have something here. Dylan Stewart breakout, all that stuff. Like they had so much to like about last year. Like to your point, the defense came on. So I think it's time to find those people. It's time to say, yeah, okay, we know we got Dylan Stewart, but let's replace the other guys, kind of like we just talked about with Auburn, which is why I alluded to South Carolina, because I think South Carolina hasn't been able to do that, and Auburn has, where they have the one guy. And Auburn's been able to activate the other guys by capitalizing on kind of the double teams, the attention paid to Keldrick Falk. But point being, yeah, I mean, again, it takes very little to stop this Kentucky. I mean, a stiff breeze to stop this Kentucky passing game. If you can't do that and play dominant, like shut down, smash mouth football the way that Shane Beamer loves to, you don't even really need the special teams in this one. Like you need to establish the number one, the run game, right? You talk about Faison and those boys, like how that hasn't exactly worked out for them. I think they really need to say, I don't care about the opponent. I'm going to play my game. I'm going to establish my game plan. Even if it doesn't work, we're going to do it because we're going to need that later in the season. This isn't about this game. To me, it's like anything but covering is a failure by South Carolina because we had high expectations. And I just said that in the last segment. It's like, I'm still not willing to say they're a bad team. I'm willing to say they struggled a lot. But even if I was a little bit lower on them than most people, I didn't see this to start the year, exactly to your point. So, like, let's get it together. Let's be the team that we South Carolina lovers expected.
This is going to sound like it's defending Mike Shula and the play calling so far at South Carolina, and it's not. It's just trying to get inside what has plagued them so far and why it feels like their only big-time offensive plays are spectacular, ridiculous highlight reel plays. I think there's a certain part of a psyche of a coordinator that sees your offensive line like not getting much push and it's a 1 yard gain or a 2 yard gain, or maybe you get stopped in the backfield. And then you think to yourself, why am I not putting the ball in the hands of my best player who is so much better than anything that I have going in my backfield right now? And that's why the desire to ditch the run game and turn to Lenore Sellers, who has the ability to make these spectacular plays. That's why this has not necessarily allowed their ground game to get into rhythm. And I'm not saying that they all of a sudden would be getting into rhythm if their running backs are getting 25 combined carries in a game or something like that. But I think that there is a little bit of that's been working against South Carolina, odd as that might sound. And it's tough to sit there and justify taking the ball out of Lenore Sellers' hands when you know what he's capable of in a given drop back. They obviously need to get more offense going than just spectacular plays via Lenore Sellers, or else South Carolina is only going to go as far as he can take them. And there's just only so much you can do with that. But it would help if they can stop the run. They need to be able to do that against Kentucky.
Yes, and I fully agree with you, and I'm seeing that as well. And I would say I think you're right on the money there, so I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would say this counterpoint of that's assuming Lenore Sellers has been healthy, right?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, we talked about this kind of in week 1 with Bo Prabula, where it's like, hey, dog, you don't need to run the ball right now. You need to run the ball deep in the SEC play when guys are getting hurt and like the grind of the schedule is really hitting. So I would argue that actually against Kentucky, let's get that 25, 30 combined carries. Let's see very few Lenore Sellers carries, because you should not, if you need him to beat Kentucky to play spectacular the way that you have to go this year, you need to figure something else out, period. So I think even if you're averaging 2 yards a carry, I mean, I know sacks are taken into account. Lenore Sellers is not an easy guy to bring down. He only has 17 rushing yards this year when you factor in sacks. That's rough. So let's just
take some deep sacks.
He does.
Which definitely hurts him in that regard.
He does. But you know what I'm saying? Let's get that number to 0. In terms of I don't want him running the ball. I don't want him taking sacks. I want him handing the ball off, going through his progressions, learning this offense. Because we saw it took – honestly, a year and some change for him to get this Dowell login system down. And when he did, it was the back half of the year. It was against A&M. It was in these games where it's like, oh, wait, no, he sees everyone now. He sees his reads. He's going through his progression. And he hasn't been able to do that yet. So I think this is a game, like I said, forget the opponent. Truly pretend they're not there and just run your game plan, because you're so right. They're going for the empty calories. They're seeing the cake in the fridge and going, I'm hungry for cake, where it's like, you need to eat your veggies, bro. Kentucky is where you eat your veggies and get your stuff figured out.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how much he wants to scramble in this one, because they very clearly did not want to run football with him a week removed from that concussion. And I think there's certainly a desire to want to make sure that he's, not putting himself in harm's way. They know how important he is to their level of success. I was looking up scramble yards here, because I think with Sellers, it's an important part of his game to need to be able to have at his disposal. It just hasn't been there this year. He's 10th, tied for 10th among SEC quarterbacks with 8 scrambles. It's pretty low. He's only got 53 scramble yards on the season, which you would not expect. That's 10th, also 10th in the SEC among quarterbacks. It's a dangerous part of their game if they can get it going and if they feel like that's important. But also, what does it say if he has to scramble in those spots, and if that's the way that he's making plays? So a lot of different moving parts at play for South Carolina, but maybe Kentucky can be their get right game. All right, well, one that you're very, very excited for, one that I'm excited for too. Awesome game. This would be the biggest game in the SEC in most weeks. Maybe you could argue it is, because it is a top 15 matchup, which technically Bama-Georgia is not. Number 4 LSU against number 13 Ole Miss. Ole Miss 1.5 point favorite. The over-under I have is 5 hours of sleep that Lane Kiffin will be getting this week. 5. Yeah.
This week?
Yep. Because I expect him to be burning the midnight oil to try and humiliate Whit Weeks on national TV. Why? Because in case you didn't spend any time on the internet this week, on Monday, Kiffin's daughter Landry announced on Instagram, hard launch as the kids would say, that she and LSU star linebacker Whit Weeks are dating. Diabolical timing.
Hilarious timing. And it might actually time up with our friend Ryan McGee's interview about Lane Kiffin that we just talked about. I think that's actually more likely the case, that Landry Kiffin is kind of getting her own personal brand out there. I'm sure that there are PR people at work that are like, hey, it's time to really, get yourself out there as you're getting interviewed about the Lane Kiffin story. There's famously that story that's kind of been out where it's like she put together a slideshow, famously.
Which Ryan and I talk about.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like she... Like I think it's more timed with that and her own personal objectives probably than to just mess with her dad, which would be very funny. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is just, man.
Well, there's 100% chance that Lane had an impact on that timing. I don't think that when this came out on Monday, it was a surprise to Lane at all. When it was released, I guarantee you, they had this conversation at some point. And she's like, hey, when would be the best time to release this sort of information? Monday, the week of the LSU game, is the best time.
Yes, and well, see that's the funny thing about Lane is like as a troll, like I am a troll, I'm a hater fundamentally. I made a career out of being a troll. Lane is on such a different level than everyone else. Like you got to really be an appreciator of the craft of trolling, understand the stuff that Lane Kiffin does, not to like whatever, but the way that he tweets and posts on TikTok.
Tweets take the over to everybody that's tweeting this
literally
out.
The way, like I told you at like midnight after the Arkansas game, he was like tweeting like the Clarion Ledger box score of the Arkansas, like the unhinged, and like I put you on his TikTok where it's like that was his daughter's TikTok actually, where it's just like you're doing stuff that is it's so nuts that will probably never be done by another head coach, and your role is so perfect in Oxford. And again, so glad he's in Oxford. Like it's so perfect for him. I hope he stays there because it's just again having all the seriousness and the hand wringing of the SEC doesn't fit for him. This is perfect because, like to your point, no other coach would be okay with this because you're right. He approved the timing for sure because no one's going to kind of outfox him.
He suggested that timing, Will. There's no way he didn't suggest that timing.
I wonder, but I don't know. I don't think that makes them look good. That's the thing. It almost kind of hypes LSU because, like, I mean, pulling the head coach's daughter is something. Like, let's be real.
It puts all the pressure on Whit Weeks. The whole goal is get him to second guess what's going on. And Lane, while he's not considered the primary play caller, Charlie Weiss Jr. doing some of that, obviously has a huge, huge impact on what that offense is going to look like. And if he can make Whit Weeks, who is known for getting downhill and boom, his instincts take over in a moment's notice. If he could make that guy think at all, Lane has already won.
Yeah, but I think think about the alternative to that, where it's I'm sure there's plenty of "Who's Your Daddy" memes. I'm sure there's plenty of Whit Weeks is the king, right? Like, so I think that first off, Lane is just very unserious in terms of I don't think he lets any of this stuff affect him. So I just say that some of it's a chess match, but I think some of it's just he's happy for his daughter. But you're right, the timing and the fact that he's been kind of unable outside of that year where now we know he really was weighing that Auburn decision and his team kind of came apart down the stretch. I think outside of that year, he's been so pro rat poison. He's almost anti Nick Saban, where it's I want everybody talking about me. Actually, I want the whole media talking about me, doubting me, hyping me up, whatever it be. So yeah, I think this is a fascinating matchup and this has been kind of an underrated one. Now it's going to be the preeminent rivalry, at least for LSU. So I'm fascinated to see kind of these two head coaches who are very different people be rivals, and these the Blake Baker versus Lane Kiffin's another fun one. Yeah, and let's not forget Ole Miss social team. By the way, just to let you know, Sage Ryan is on your team. So if you tweet highlights of Sage Ryan getting cooked, doesn't look good for you. Just want to put that out there.
A lot of different ways I can respond to that. I'm just going to pivot right off of that. Lane's going to be well aware of the over at 54.5 points. He's probably also very much aware that his team is a 1.5 point favorite, even though he's got a second string quarterback facing the number 4 team in the sport. It's a testament to Lane. It really is. I mean, I expect Trinidad Chambliss to get this opportunity moving forward. And golly, I cannot stop saying Trinidad Chambliss. Just it's an all-time great name.
I think we can say it at this point. I think that they're a better team with Trinidad Chambliss.
Yes. Lane has admitted that. He is not a back and forth QB guy. Once he makes his decision, he's gone. And I know he had moments coming into 22 where he essentially gave Luke Altmaier an audition in one of those games because of the way the schedule sets up. And, Jackson Dart was able to win that job. And they essentially got to have an ongoing quarterback competition into the season. But still, once he makes his decision, just like we saw 2016 Alabama with Jalen Hurts, he's gone. He's going to stick with it. And guys know. And as it's related to the sleep thing, he put in 2 full game plans for Chambliss and Austin Simmons ahead of that Arkansas game, just in case Simmons was going to be healthy. He's going to need to put all of his eggs in that basket, in that Chambliss basket against the Blake Baker defense, which has performed pretty well. I think it performed pretty well against Ole Miss last year. I think we can say that. Different defense this year, though. Different what they've been able to do compared to last year when they had a lot more inconsistency. And obviously didn't have Harold Perkins for this one last year. All 4 games for this LSU defense, they've had 1 touchdown allowed in each of them. Nobody has been able to reach 4.0 yards per carry yet against the LSU defense. That's important. Obviously, Ole Miss, pretty capable of changing both of those trends. That is, scoring multiple touchdowns on offense. I think they could do that regardless of who Lane's daughter is dating. They're averaging 7.4 yards per carry. Kewan Lacey has been awesome in a not so stunning development. Lane found portal receivers and Deuce Alexander and Harrison Wallace, who was told that he was part of the reason why Drew Allard couldn't complete a pass to Penn State receivers. Apparently, he's actually pretty good. Imagine that. Penn State receivers have to go elsewhere to have their talent untapped. Keandre Lambert-Smith.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to get Caden Lee going as well. I think he was a little bit banged up coming into the year. I love the balance that Ole Miss has, and I will make the not so bold prediction that they become the first team to have multiple touchdowns against this LSU defense this year, maybe even in the first quarter. Maybe get off to like a 14-0 lead in this one. That's going to force LSU's offense into a spot that it hasn't been in this year. It's possible they might actually benefit from that in the long term. LSU might need to get into a game like this where you have to get big time conversions with the passing game. You're not just, necessarily controlling the clock down the stretch. Like, hey, you need to get points going. You need to get in a hurry. Maybe that allows this LSU offense oddly to kind of get into a rhythm that they haven't been asked to do just yet. Well, in the preseason, I had LSU going 15-1 and winning a national championship. This is the one game I had LSU losing. I'm sticking with that. I'm saying Ole Miss wins this one 31-28. As Lane predicted, the overhits.
And as a person who had LSU losing Clemson, although I don't think anyone could have predicted how just putrid Clemson is this year, something is up. Like we've talked about, something is up with this offense and Garrett Nussmeier. It's that he's not seeing the field well. I don't think he's a terrible player. We've kind of talked about this a little bit. And, it seems like they got some of that stuff figured out. Just hear me out. I know, Southeastern Louisiana. But like I said, to the point about Kentucky with South Carolina, sometimes you just need to run your offense and forget about the defense. And I think that's what LSU has been unable to do this year. Starting the year at Clemson.
I agree.
La Tech was just a gross game. Guys kept getting hurt. The offensive line was putrid. I think that Joe Sloan is on about week 4 of getting screamed at by Brian Kelly. I think that Nussmeier is on about week 3 of having people basically question him and, the NIL money, Nussmeier, I wish we had Jaden Daniels back. I think that last year, I'll give Pete Golding and this defense credit. This was a game last year where all the scoring happened kind of like in the second quarter. It was like this massive rash of scoring. And then outside of that, both teams were pretty much held in check. And so they were able to figure out last year's Nussmeier, who was a much better player, right? Now, that being said, and again, that was in Baton Rouge as well. That being said, I think that we finally see Nussmeier and this new look offense with these receivers, with Trey'Dez Green coming back. I think it's going to be a really big deal. Say what you will about the Joe Sloan offense, but sometimes throwing the ball to the 6'8" guy in the end zone is just a good play. Shout out Michael Trigg, we talked about the other day. And so point being, I think that they're going to have some of those guys back. The offensive line's coming back. I think that the over will hit in this one, and I would just flip the scores on you. I think that LSU pulls ahead here because I think that fundamentally, I know home and away matters a ton in this rivalry. It's literally been back and forth. But LSU is a fundamentally better and more talented team, and Ole Miss is a fundamentally less talented team than last year. You can't just replace Jackson Dart, an NFL starting quarterback, and think, okay, we played this team kind of back and forth. The defense wasn't great for LSU last year. I think that Trinidad Chambliss has been awesome. And again, I've been singing this praise. I think it's really cool that Ole Miss fans have the Trinidad flag in their bio on Twitter. I think it's really cool and good for him. I love the story. But I think that if Blake Baker struggles against this offense and this quarterback, we got to adjust our expectations a little bit because this is not the best team and the best offense they're going to see. They need to win a game like this to have a couple in hand for later in the SC schedule.
I think you're allowed to have a mulligan or two, even if you're a championship level defense. Even 2017 Alabama, when it went into Starkville and Nick Fitzgerald gave them everything that they could handle. It's a good Dan Mullen offense. Atmosphere contributes to that. Alabama had to get some late heroics to be able to pull that one out. I think sometimes that happens to these units that are mostly really good, and it could happen. And all of a sudden, you just kind of find yourself in a game like that. And I don't think it necessarily means that you're just going to be, in this spot all year where that was the beginning of some issues. I think LSU has shown me enough where even if they come out and they allow 31 points as I predicted in this game, I'm still going to feel good about the LSU defense. I still will feel like they've corrected a lot of their key areas. I still love me some Mansour Delane. I think that a lot of the things that they've shown this year will play, and it'll play throughout, conference competition. And it's still going to be a unit that I feel good about week in, week out. Where I do think Ole Miss has the ability to kind of play with some house money here is they have shown that so far this year, they can get up for the lesser games, and it had with the exception of their quarterback turning the football over, which that was what played them in those first two games. I think that the response has been really good in some of these games. And I said, like, coming into this year that Ole Miss was the fifth. They were going to finish fifth in the SEC, but I wasn't sure that they were going to be the fifth best team in the SEC. I thought the schedule was going to be really favorable. I had them going 9-3. And I think that they've shown a lot of things already, and specific to their ground game too, that make you think they can kind of win in a lot of different situations. And that's been a thing that I've questioned throughout the Lane Kiffin era is, can they win this type of game? Can they win this type of game? I think this can go in a lot of different directions. And I still feel like LSU has the pieces that could struggle at different moments against Ole Miss, whether that's a pressure package from Pete Golding that he's dialed up, or being able to get, oh my God, they just got that right matchup in space over the middle and Chambliss saw it and boom, that's a 60-yard touchdown. Like, I just think Ole Miss can do a lot of different things right now that LSU in the long term will benefit from this. Again, losing this game and winning a national title. I think all those things can be true. I think this game should be really good. Should be really, really good. I'm looking forward to it.
And I'd say too, like, you are seeing what has happened this year. Like, I am fully picking on a little bit of hopium and projecting, because at the end of the day, I think that Ole Miss, maybe against a little bit lesser competition, but I think they've been a more complete team than LSU. I think that's fair enough to say.
I would agree with that.
And
Yeah.
I would say too, I mean, I think you just hit on it exactly, which is that Lane Kiffin has thrived in the underdog role, right? Like, last year they had the NFL quarterback and all the transfers.
But they're favored.
Right. But I'm saying in terms of like the nobody believed in us, right? In terms of the LSU is the big dog, nobody believed in little Ole Miss. And again, like, going to these one score games, like, Lane's fourth in the SEC at 14-7 in one score games. Again, Brian Kelly's number one, but it's not like Lane has had this reputation as a guy whose teams fall flat. It's just, it feels like last year, again, they beat Georgia, but against lesser competition when they had the expectations. This is a completely different situation. So I'm there with you. It's like they've been a little bit of a giant killer. That's why I think Oxford's so perfect for him. So I think based on what we've seen of these two teams, Ole Miss should win this game. And to be honest, like, I think they should probably win pretty big based on what we've seen. I'm just, like I said, predicting that surely Garrett Nussmeier can't just have forgotten his, 20 plus years of football history with his dad being a coach and everything. And I'll put a bow on it right here. How do you feel about Ole Miss's run defense?
I don't know that it's been, well, I mean, Kentucky did some good things against it. But I don't know that it's been put on its heels that much, because if Kentucky had a really good lights out run game, and if Ole Miss was really struggling against that, Kentucky wins that game after the start that they get off to. Now, what's alarming about the LSU ground game, and this is very well documented why Ole Miss could actually be in a good spot, Caden Durham hasn't exactly been making people miss, and the lack of commitment to that. Like, I think he's got 5 or 6 forced missed tackles this year, and one of them was on like the very first play from scrimmage, the run that he had against Clemson, the 25-yard run to start the season.
Take out the first play of the season. Brian Kelly, take out the last play of the season. Take those 2 plays. That's LSU's whole running offense, really.
Yeah, so I don't know that this is going to test them that much. And I like Caden Durham a lot, but I think Ole Miss, I think if they were really plagued on that side of the ball with a very new look defensive line, I think you probably would have seen it play out against Kentucky. I don't know. I mean, it's not as good as that unit was last year, but I don't know that this is going to be a unit that LSU can assume it'll feast on.
Yes, and I'll say Xavier Harris, the giant gentleman with the silent X in his name. I talked to him a little bit in the offseason. He's been a beast this year. I think against that matchup against Braylon Moore. Look, if you see DJ Chester come in this game, go ahead, throw in that towel, okay? Because if you get that guy matched up with DJ Chester, a big boy on a big boy that can't block, we got problems. That's all DJ Chester has is his size. So if you get a bigger guy than him who can get lower. But yeah, I think it's about that A gap. That's been LSU's weakness. Even this year, that's been Ole Miss's strength. So you're right. Shifty is kind of interesting whenever, like, I feel like the offensive line's just been in the wrong position for most of the run plays. I think it's more about, like, LSU needs to maybe not run the power I like they did against Florida at the end of the game to shut people up, but to actually put Caden Durham in space. Maybe take a page out of Mike Bobo's book, as sad as that is to say out loud. But yeah, I think it's just about, like, he's not a downhill running back. He isn't. He's not Leonard Fournette, who's going to push people sideways. They got to get him in space and not have him meeting contact immediately. But yeah, the more I think about this, the worse I feel about LSU, but I'm still going to pick the boys because I think Nuss needs a bounce back badly, or it's going to be a rough season for LSU.
Love it. Love it. All right. Number 15, Tennessee, 7.5-point favorites against Mississippi State. The over-under I have is kind of straightforward, 21 Tennessee points. That is what Tennessee is averaging in true road games the last 2 seasons, 3-6 in those games. Josh Heupel is 8-10 overall in true road games, very well documented. Adam Sparks had an interesting piece writing about, is Josh Heupel really that bad on the road relative to everyone else in the SEC? And if you actually look at, what he's done against SEC competition in these true road games, there's like 3 SEC active coaches that have a winning record in road games against SEC teams. So it is an important context to remember that. Against his former assistant, Jeff Lebby, who could be playing with house money. Gotta think
he
that
is
Jeff
playing without
Lebby,
money after that. After the Arizona State win, it's almost like, hey, buddy, season success. Like,
right? Undefeated start. I mean, they've already doubled their win total year to year. Like he's feeling good. And if you're Jeff Lebby, you want to beat your former boss. I mean, they can say all they want. It's just another game. No, you want to beat your former boss, master disciple. That matchup always matters. I think they're going to try and get some of these matchups on the outside with Brennan Thompson. Let Blake Shapen have that deep ball be the equalizer. I said coming into last year, Mississippi State hasn't had a deep ball passer as good as Blake Shapen since Dak Prescott. And if you kind of look at the history of the quarterbacks, it's actually not that bold to say that. But seeing him healthy and seeing what it can look like and the ability that he has to recognize things at the line of scrimmage is really important for what they need to be this year. Ty Redmond, the true freshman corner for Tennessee, he's been thrust into the starting role with Tennessee's injury issues in the secondary. Why is it hard to be a freshman corner in the SEC? It's kind of an obvious question. An obvious answer is because you get targeted a ton. You just do. Everybody in the building knows that's the freshman. You might as well have a different helmet or a different jersey on, okay? Redmond has been targeted a ton in coverage this year, 28 times. That is 8 more times than any SEC corner. Only 4 FBS corners have been targeted more than Redmond this year. He's allowed 16 catches. Only 7 FBS corners have allowed more. You expect that number to be high, of course. But even though he's allowed the most yards in coverage of any SEC corner so far this year, he's actually had mostly a solid start, and he's been okay, and he hasn't been this total liability. Like, Tennessee fans have been pleasantly surprised with what he's been able to do. These secondaries have been good so far, despite what one might assume, the way that their DNA with offensive-minded head coaches would suggest that they're winning games. And you would assume probably Mississippi State, dormant defense last year, Tennessee, down Ricky Gibson, down Jermod McCoy. Like, these secondaries probably haven't been very good. No, they've been good. They've been really good. I don't think this will be their best day at the office. I don't. I know I said that with Sam Leavitt, that he was going to be able to pick apart Mississippi State's defense, and then he comes out there and he throws for 82 yards. Hand up, missed that one. I think Josh Heupel, Joey Aguilar, a ground game that you have to respect, and you cannot afford to have light boxes against these teams. I think it allows these quarterbacks to be able to trust their receivers to go up and make some plays. The scenario I cannot picture is this, Will. We said a whole lot of nice things about Tennessee and Joey Aguilar after the Georgia loss. They make a kick. They're top 5 in the country. We're talking about something entirely different for how this season could play out. But still, I think they have a lot in front of them. I can't picture 2 weeks after that coming on the Sunday pod and the Vols are 0-2 in SEC play and essentially eliminated from the conference title race. I don't think that happens. I think Tennessee wins this one 42-28. Another shootout. Shootouts galore in the SEC this week.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to shout out too. I was trying to find this total list of the top 20, but the highest graded SEC corners on PFF.
Yeah, Mississippi State's got 3 on that list, I believe.
There you go. Boom. Okay, so it was like 3 in the top 20. I can only find the top 10, but yeah, they have they have 3 in the top 10. It's right here. Boom, number 3, number 5, number 6. So like that's kind of been like an unheralded part of this is like how good that Mississippi State defense has been as well. And so, yeah, to your point, like they're a nice story, but I think that in terms of the objectives of both teams, and I think also they haven't exactly seen the quarterback like Aguilar. Now, to be clear, many people would have said that about Sam Leavitt. Many people would have said that about Sam Leavitt, but in terms of preseason, and again, like Sam Leavitt had some crazy plays against Texas State, who's to say? But that being said, like, I think that the reality of Joey Aguilar and what he has been to Tennessee is so hard to guard because we've talked about it. Guys that know, how to like place the football, guys that know how to use their legs and just freeze the defense a little bit. This is going to be actually a much bigger measuring stick, I think, for Mississippi State in that we've seen the Josh Heupel offense pounce on you, right? And we've seen when you get to like the master versus student thing, how much can the student kind of differentiate from what the master has taught them? the guys that have been able to do that and kind of build into their own thing. And honestly, Heupel is such a great example of that with the Mike Leach coaching tree, where he's built more of that power run game in there over the years. And we saw that last year, obviously. But I think that they're just not far enough removed, and Mississippi State has not had enough time really to, no guarantee that they will create a dynamic offense outside of, Heupel and all that, but they haven't had a proof of concept yet that I can say, okay, this is what they do better than Heupel, especially from a talent standpoint. It's so crazy what Mississippi State has done with the talent level they have. I mean, I couldn't say enough positive things about this team for right now, but again, just based on their objectives, I'm right there with you. I think Tennessee's got this one.
Their offensive identity, Mississippi State's offensive identity is there. Like year 2, Jeff Lebby, those offenses have been good. And once he kind of gets his style in there, it definitely makes a big difference. It doesn't mean that they're going to impose their will against a defense that we really respect that Tennessee has with Tim Banks. But I think that there are going to be a lot more moments than not this year that they can stretch the field, they can take advantage of these mismatches, and they can just kind of be a big play waiting to happen. I just expect, maybe I'll be proven wrong on this, I expect some defensive regression. I do. Josh Heupel is the type of guy to expose a defense that has been really good, but I'm just not sure that the depth, the talent to be able to get pressure on Joey Aguilar to force him into these tough situations, I'm just not sure that that's going to be there for 60 minutes in this game.
Fully agree.
All right, well, fade of the week. It's not lock of the week, it's fade of the week. I'm not sure who told you to take Clemson minus 17.5. Couldn't have been me.
That's honestly maybe the worst one of these of all time. I was impressed. I was sitting there going, hey, again, Dabo selectively, I guess, reads Connor O'Gara, because when Connor slanders him about the run, he reads that and puts it up on the wall. Doesn't stop the run necessarily, but whenever Connor says, hey, I believe in you, he gets worse somehow.
I'm done believing in Clemson. I'm not alone. Now we're going to get a little personal here. I was a 7.5 point favorite hosting my alma mater, my Indiana Hoosiers. Call this emotional hedging. I don't care. It's fate of the week. Interpret it how you will.
Okay.
Hawkeyes cover plus 7.5. There have been world beaters that have gone into Kinnick and not come out alive. All right.
Okay.
Maybe Indiana is going to be a world beater, but we will not be 0-5 here. We will find a way to get one on the board. Or else I think I just have to shoot the moon. I mean, it is fate of the week, so I have leaned into that fully. If I do fall to 0-5 by picking Iowa to cover 7.5 plus 7.5, I'm such a sucker. The hook is there. I'm such a sucker. Cignetti's going to have them up by 28 at halftime, and I'm going to say, Connor, you idiot. Idiot.
Respectfully, didn't we just kind of watch this game with Indiana?
In Bloomington, not in Iowa City.
Okay.
Everybody's singing the praises of IU, understandably so. Again, we are living in a world in which Indiana has the Heisman Trophy favorite in Fernando Mendoza. Okay? Shout out Lance Taylor. That was his Heisman pick coming into the year. That's looking like a pretty good ticket. I'm not sure if he's going to cash that early or if he's going to ride that one out. But there is always that yeah, but. And I don't know last year in these road games that Indiana had a lot of these types of matchups against an Iowa team that, yes, they lost to Iowa State. We're having different conversations about Iowa if they had been able to win that game. But against an Iowa team that might have an offense. Gronowski's pretty good, man.
What was that guy's name? Westgen, the second coming of Cooper DeJean, the dude that returned as like a 104-yard kickoff against Rutgers. That was a fun little appetizer last week.
They scored some points in that one. Everybody's going, this ain't my older brother's Iowa team. What are they doing? 28 points with 31 points? What? This is conference play. This is when you should be in the teens. Get out of here.
Greg Schiano paid off by the mob. People are asking. Anyway.
We'll bleep that part out.
Can't let that get out. We can't talk about the mob. Anyway.
We don't talk about the mob. All right. Let's get to Ryan McGee. One of my favorite people in this business. Great conversation we were able to have about Lane Kiffin's past, his present, his future, all those different things. Plus, we dug into some surprise entries in the bottom 10. So here is Ryan McGee. For those of you who are not watching Saturday Down South podcast on YouTube and just are audio only, Now would be a good time to go on YouTube and subscribe to Saturday Down South because we have all of our episodes are uploaded in full. If you like watching our individual game breakdowns, you're like, hey, you know what? 2 hour pod, that's really not for me. I really just kind of want to hear about my own team. That's fine. Saturday Down South on YouTube. We're going to have all of those matchup breakdowns. We do every single power conference game. We preview, we recap. That involve the SEC. So we have so much content right now on Saturday Down South on YouTube. We have YouTube exclusive videos, and sometimes we'll do interviews that are just on Saturday Down South on YouTube. So definitely go subscribe. Please do that right now. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Ryan McGee. Ryan, a lot to get to with you as we are approaching week 5 here. I want to start with your E60 doc that debuts on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Probably by the time people are listening to this, The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin. I had a chance to watch it last week, and the best endorsement I can give you is that I had planned on watching 10 minutes of it and then coming back to it later in the evening, like after, wife has gone to bed, and I'm just going to watch the the final 50 minutes and I was going to get a workout in. And then once I put it on, I couldn't turn it off and I just watched the entire thing. It's excellent. I mean, Lane does not do stuff like this. Can you explain just kind of how all of this came together?
Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to get it out there. We've been working on this thing since, back in early spring. Of this year. And honestly, in the pitch, we started pitching this to Lane a year ago. And you'll appreciate this. Part of my pitch initially was, hey, we can do the stock. And, they're in the middle of the season and let me get through it. And then, the Netflix series dropped, which has been great. But he's not in that. He chose not to participate. And so part of my pitch to him was, I can give you a whole hour to yourself. and that helped if you know Lane. But it's no, I'm excited for people to see it. I'm very thankful for his willingness to sit down and, this, in different places, podcasts, interviews, whatever, he's addressed the Raiders over here, and he's addressed Tennessee over there, and he's addressed, Saban over here. To my knowledge, he's never done it all at once until now. And we go, it's the title of the film, right? The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin. We go station by station, all the way back to, starting at Fresno State. And even earlier than that, his father, Monty Kiffin, of course, inventor of the Tampa 2 defense, legend. He's a huge part, as you know, of the documentary and his relationship with his dad. And I adored his dad. I loved his dad. His dad, so I never told you this story, but Monty's only head coaching job was at North Carolina State in the early 80s, 3 years. And that was right when my father was starting out as an ACC football official. We lived in Raleigh, which meant Dad couldn't officiate NC State games per the rules, but he worked all the scrimmages and all the practices because, Coach Kiffin wanted to know the rules and the refs needed the reps. So my dad would take my brother and myself to all these practices, and we would play pickup football with the kids of the coaches, and Lane was there, and he's 6 years old. And I remembered him because obviously he's the head coach's son, but also he was the only one out there calling DPIs and holding and all that stuff. We're playing pickup football. And so fast forward 20 years of my brother calling and going, I think that mouthy kid from State just got the Raiders job. And so I've been around Lane in some way, shape, or form since we were kids. He denies that story, by the way. His dad backed me up. When they were at FAU, his dad was like, no. I remember having to blow the whistle and stop practice and tell Lane to quit blowing up my practice. So the gift of, this better than anyone, someone sitting down and just sharing everything. And you can kind of sense it when an interview is going in a direction that's even further than you thought it was going to go. I'm very thankful for his time, and hopefully we did that justice with the 1 hour on ESPN.
Ryan, what was the biggest revelation for you while doing this process that took a while to put together? And this is obviously not just something that comes together. You talk about like how long and how much you have to make a pitch and whatnot. But what was the thing that going through all this, all the interviews, everything related to Lane that you came away from going, I feel differently about that now compared to before this?
That I believe him. And I don't mean that as a slight, but he has changed as a human being. And, as a father, he keeps talking about the second chance of being an in-person father. And, like in the documentary, you see there's this scene of them having like family dinner. That wasn't staged. That's how that goes down, multiple nights a week. And his brother, Chris, one of his assistant coaches now, literally their backyards bump up to each other. And his daughter is Landry's a junior at Ole Miss. His son Knox has moved to Oxford from LA to play football at Oxford High School. His ex-wife Layla like has a place in Oxford now. So they're all there except for the one middle child who's playing volleyball on the West Coast. And so when when he sits and talks about changing himself, and physically you can see it, obviously, right? I mean, the guy's lost 50 pounds. He's turned 50. He's doing hot yoga and playing pickleball all the time. But he also has become very like introspective, like, and he's really changed who he is as a person. Who moves to Oxford and quits drinking? No one,
It's a good
right?
point.
No one, and he has not had a drink in 5 years, and so it's just he's a new human being at the age of 50, and I don't know if I would have bought that 100%. And I'm not naive. People who watch this documentary who live in Knoxville, or who are live in Oakland, they might not come around, but at least I think they might understand that he is a work in progress, and I think that's commendable because when you turn 50, you kind of at a crossroads. It's been working out pretty well. Why don't I stick with the way I'm doing it, or can I be a better person? And so when he repeatedly kept talking about improving himself, that caught me off guard. I knew he had done some of the things that he'd done, but his dedication to it, I think I had underestimated.
Yeah, Tom Herman just turned 50 this offseason, and where's he? Like there
Yeah,
are like
yeah.
this there's just no guarantee that you get a second life in this sort of way, and it takes obviously certain perspective changing over the course of those struggles to get to this place. And
Yep.
Lane looks like someone who's fortunate to get here. His cockiness, his brashness, it always, in my opinion, reflected someone who just wasn't comfortable in his own skin. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about this piece is he said he used to not care what people thought about him, and that kind of was reflected in his actions. And now he actually does care because he
Right.
realizes kind of how his actions impact other people. And it's just a totally inverse way to mature in a lot of, but everything about Lane feels like an inverse that's playing out in real time. What did you kind of make of that and how it was reflected in his career progression?
Well, I think that it's interesting too because he's very honest about when he took the Ole Miss job, he thought the same thing that all the rest of us thought, which was this is a bridge job, right? Be there a few years, have a little success, get a better offer somewhere else. But he says it we put it in the trailer. He said it repeatedly: is I needed Oxford more than Oxford needed me. And he talks about the fact that he looked down his nose, I'm paraphrasing, but looked down his nose at the pace of Oxford. It's going to be too slow for me. But what that slower pace has done is it gave him the room mentally, on his schedule, however you want to look at it, to broaden himself a little bit and to look inside himself a little bit. And I don't think you are afforded that in Austin or in Los Angeles or even in like a Knoxville. I don't think that he would have ever given himself the room unless he was in a situation where he was given the space. And some of that started at FAU. I went down there when he was at FAU, which we don't spend a lot of time on in the doc. But I went down to FAU and saw him win the Shula Bowl against FIU, and I sat in the press box with his dad, who I hadn't talked to since I was a kid, and it was even then I could see because when I talked to the Kiffins about Boca Raton and they're winning 10 games a year and winning the conference, what they talked about was every morning walking on the beach as a family and reconnecting as a family. And Chris was there, and mom and dad were there, and the kids and Layla weren't there, but they would come visit. But he talked about you know walking on the beach and holding hands with his mom. And so I think some of that started before he got to Ole Miss, but then Ole Miss was even slower, right? And really gave him the room to do this self improvement. Yeah. By the way, he wanted me to do the hot yoga with him, and I declined. I'm like, dude, number one, I have no experience with this, and number two, I ain't doing it on television. The first time I go in there, I'm definitely not going to do that with cameras rolling. But he does it every day, even when they're on the road. Like on a game day on the road, he takes a hot yoga class before they start going through breakfast and walk through and all those things. And it's that dedication that I'm impressed with because he and I are about the same age, and I don't spend as much time working on myself as I should, and he's way busier than I am. So how he's done that, I'm not sure.
He looks good, and I wouldn't tell that to his face again
Yeah,
because the last time I did that was at SEC Media Days in 2021 after he lost all that weight, and he like was
yeah,
tweeting about it, and he's like that's a weird thing to ask another guy of like how'd you get in shape, and I was like oh okay sorry my bad, but Lane that's like still that's just a sign of he's just still a little bit awkward.
yeah.
He's very one of one, and I've spent a lot of time in this role in this job that I've had trying to figure out why it is that we're so captivated by Lane. And I think it's in part because three high profile exits in 5 years. There's not a coach in North American sports who had a 5 year run like that with those exits and how weird they were at every level. And we are always just going to be captivated by Lane because we're always anticipating the next move with him. And maybe that's unfair to the people of Ole Miss who have now seen 6 years of this, but we're soon going to be talking about all the jobs that Lane could leave for. Could he leave for Florida and all this? Do you get a sense that the list is really, really small? Because I do. And I know he said at Tennessee, USC is the only job in America I would have left for. That fell on deaf ears, obviously, and Tennessee fans don't want to hear that. But what's the sense you get about that list and kind of if that is even a thought for Lane Kiffin at this point anymore?
Yeah, Tennessee fans, as in my wife and my in-laws and my college roommates, right? Yeah, they're very angry with me that I even did this thing to start off with. But no, but I and I've been wrong before so many times, but I was in Oxford, what, 3 or 4 times between spring and summer. And, I was at last year in the 2024 season, we did Marty McGee and SEC Nation in Gainesville week 1 and 3. And week 3, we had to go to this mandatory dinner at Strickland's house, at the athletic director's house, and all those boosters were saying, we'll have him here by the end of October. Because,
Wow.
obviously Billy Napier saved his job, but now it's happening again. And his name is coming up for a lot of jobs. And you're right. I think the list is extremely short, but I don't know that there is a list. And I say that based on the experience that I've had with him. He's so happy. And I think that when he talks about Knoxville, the reason he's sad is because I think he believes that he could have had this in Knoxville. I know Layla thinks that, his ex-wife. If they'd have stayed in there, the great what if is what if they'd stayed in Knoxville because they loved it. And Layla really loved it. And this is a Florida girl, right? And she loved it there. They named her son Knox, right? I mean, they loved it there. And I think that they, to this day, think, man, what would it have been had we stuck that out? And I think that little voice is in the back of his head when it comes to Ole Miss, which is, the grass isn't always greener. Now the money might be, right? There's a lot more green over there that way, and the prestige might be, but the story's told, and you saw it about the Auburn job. He says he had not decided if he was going to take that job or had he been offered it or whatever. But there's a great story that Landry, his daughter, tells about. She had just moved to Oxford and was going to her senior year in high school, moved from Los Angeles because she wanted to go to Ole Miss and she wanted to live with her dad, hadn't lived with him since she was little. And he starts talking about the Auburn job, and she's like, I just got here. And now you're going to leave? And there's a great story in the doc about she and her friends put together this super sad PowerPoint presentation and dropped it on him in his office. And so I've told every Ole Miss fan, if you never met Landry, you need to meet her and thank her because she's probably the reason that Lane Kiffin is still in Oxford. So I don't know that he's going to leave. I think he's happy. And I think that he wants to do things there that no one's ever done before. And with all the greatest respect to Archie Manning and Johnny Vaught, with the exception of a national championship, this is the greatest run of Ole Miss football, and it's not even that close. And so I think that he wants to bring rings to that building. You know this. When you go to Vaught Hemingway, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite venues in all of sports, let alone college football. But there aren't a lot of accolades on the wall, right?
No.
It's a co-division championship under David Cutcliffe, and it's a national title and SEC title from the '60s. That's it. And so if he can get them to the next level, even just for a year, plus reconnecting with his family who have all moved to Oxford, then it's going to be a hard sell to get someone to get him to want to leave that.
There's so many what ifs, so many sliding doors. You talk about Landry and how Landry very much made it seem, and it was great that you guys had the interview with her as well. She made it seem like he was probably going to be going to
Yep.
Auburn, and you're not pulling out that sort of card unless you think he's gone. Lane made it seem like he hadn't made up his mind. And it is fascinating to look back of what it could have been had he decided at the end of the 2022 season when everybody was speculating, yeah, he's going to replace Brian Harsin at Auburn. If he had decided to go in that direction, all the things that we'd be talking about with Lane right now. But there is another sliding door. And I'm curious if you considered this as well. What if that phone call with the USC booster when he was talking about the potential sanctions of the Pete Carroll era? What if that had been, we're really not sure what our sanctions are going to be. We're not sure, how this is going to play out. This is kind of feel like maybe they're going to hit the hammer. Instead, he talks to the booster, who obviously like they're never going to say, "Oh yeah, we're about to get," they're going to throw the book at us, the NCAA. And Lane, I don't know that Lane takes that job if he knows what's coming. And that's maybe the
No.
most interesting sliding door. And is Lane still the Tennessee coach if that phone call goes differently?
Yeah, no. I think it 100% he stays. But if someone had been honest with him, and and who are these USC people, right? Because you know this, we tell the tarmac story about Pat Hayden, and something I had never heard was how close Lane believed. I think Pat Hayden was ready to say, you know what, never mind, you get to stay, but he had to go make a phone call first. So who are these people? But I'm with you. If they had been honest with him, hey, we're probably going to get popped. I don't know that he takes that job because the job that people he doesn't get enough credit for that year at Tennessee because there's this there's this retroactive history that's told about Philip Fulmer. And the reality is the last half decade Phil Fulmer was there was a mess. And I remember going to spring practice, Lane Kiffin's only spring practice at Tennessee, and him talking to a group of reporters and us and going, I don't have a center. There's no one on this roster that can snap the ball to the quarterback. And he's on the phone to his friends at junior colleges. I need a center. I just need someone who can snap the football. And Fulmer was an offensive line guy, supposedly, right? So I don't people I don't he does not get enough credit for what he did in the 1 year he was there. And so yes, the what if, the sliding doors you say, is what kind of momentum did he have taking a pretty bad football team and still turning it into a winning record who should have beaten Alabama that year and not go to USC. But yeah, if they had been honest with him and they weren't, because you talk to people who were in the building then, they knew they were going to get popped. If they thought they could talk their way out of it, they don't. And again, talking about retroactive history, I don't care that it wouldn't be illegal now. What Reggie Bush did was egregious. It was. And they knew it was coming. And something was coming. And so for them to, and then for him to win the games that he won in the first couple of years with the limited scholarships, the fact that their patience ran out with him in a tough situation that they knew was coming that they didn't tell him about, yeah, it's a huge sliding door. So yes, it's the two big what ifs, and they're both tied together.
Yeah. And now here we are in 2025. It's a different version of Lane, a 50-year-old Lane. And at the same time, what happens early in this week ahead of a big time matchup? His
Yeah.
daughter is in all over the news with the hard launch of the relationship with Whit Weeks, the star LSU linebacker. And it's just like Lane's tweeting out, take the over on this. And it's so peak Lane. And you know, it just all of this makes me think whenever I try and figure out who this guy is, what his next move is going to be, all these different things, I just come back to I'm glad he's in our sport.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like I don't have a vested interest. I'm just glad he's in our sport.
I say that all the time about certain programs. You can really dislike Alabama and you can really dislike USC and you can really dislike Texas. But man, Miami, but the sport is more interesting when they're relevant, right? It's just you want them around. You gotta have a Darth Vader, right? Yeah, there's someone you don't like, and then if you like them, it's this next gen Steve Spurrier, right? Back in the day, it was Steve Spurrier. If he was your coach, you loved him. If you were with the other 130 schools, you hated him. And in Lane Kiffin's case, it's very similar, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't ride Twitter like a mechanical bull like he used to on an hourly basis. But when he picks his spots, as he has done this very week, then he's still pretty good at it.
You were at Oklahoma last week with SEC Nation for the first time. What did you take away from your time in Norman?
My favorite thing about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC has been, I've been to Oklahoma a million times. I was on Baker Mayfield duty, when Baker was there his last 2 years. We did an E60 about Baker. And so I was up there all the time. And it's such a great place. And to walk down the Heisman Trail, and there's 7 Heisman Trophy winners, these statues, and then right next to that, there's the statues of the coaches of Stoops and Switzer and Bud Wilkinson. It's a super, super smart crowd, Boomer Schooner and all that. My favorite thing are all these old school SEC fans who've never been to Oklahoma and don't know anything about it, them going to experience that. Same at Texas. We were at Texas last year for the first time, and Kentucky was there. And the Kentucky fans were having a better time than anyone else because they were like, Austin's amazing. And all these Auburn fans on Friday that were taking the campus tour and we're going to the bookstore and we're getting stadium tours. And it's just so cool to me to kind of educate these kind of insular SEC fans. When I was a student at Tennessee, I didn't understand. I grew up in North Carolina, right? So I go to Tennessee, and I remember we played UCLA like in the Rose Bowl, like week 1 or 2 my freshman year, and all the old school Tennessee people were like, whatever, man, that'd be fine. I'm like, they're really good. They got a quarterback could be an All-American, but that's when I realized SEC fans, they live in the SEC bubble and they don't think anyone else is probably worthy of that. And so they don't know much about Oklahoma and they don't know much about Texas. And so to get to see them experience it, and then the flip side of that, which is Oklahoma fans and Texas fans getting to go to Neyland and getting to go to Georgia and getting to go to these places, that's the fun part for me is watching people go, man, this is awesome.
True or false? You were filling in for Feinbaum on Friday at the start of the show because Paul was interviewing to become the next AD at Oklahoma.
Yeah. I I kept asking Paul. So I was really tired. I'd taken the red eye back from Oregon on Thursday night. I'm too old to be doing that. And I'm thinking, you know what? I don't have any TV on Friday when I get to Norman. I'm just going to have our meeting and go to bed. And as soon as I land, they're like, you got to host Feinbaum because he's not here. And so he was. And then when I tried to ask him, where were you? He was very dicey about it. So yeah, I asked him if maybe he was interviewing for the chancellor's job is open at Syracuse now. Like, were you up there? But I don't. There's no telling where Paul is. He's that's why he's the most interesting man in college football, not named Lane Kiffin.
He couldn't have been further away than you were the day prior. I
No,
mean, there's just no
he
way.
was somewhere in Texas. I do know that. But I don't know why he was there. I don't know if his plane was diverted. I don't know if he was like, interviewing someone. If he was, I have no idea. Having lunch with
Could be.
Steve Sarkisian, I have no clue. But all I know is on 0 hours of sleep, I had to interview Brent Venables and Patty Gasso and Greg McElroy, and I don't even really remember any of it.
It was good. I saw
Thank
one
you.
of the clips that came out with Venables and
He's
talking about like
great.
how he doesn't want to joke. He fits in very, very well.
Yeah.
I don't know that there are a lot of people that are wired quite like he is though. And
No.
that's what's unique about him.
And he literally, if you were making a movie and you were casting just I need a football coach to stand on the sideline, Venables is the guy. So he showed up for the interview with a whistle around his neck.
Yeah, he was in
I,
his usual like
oh,
his same outfit that he wears on Saturdays. I think
I
he was
was like,
wearing for the
dude,
interview.
yeah, I was like, you have a whistle around your neck. He's like, we're doing walkthroughs right over here as soon as I'm done talking to you, which is why the interview was not 20 minutes. It was about 10 minutes. But I love that dude. I loved him when he was an assistant coach, when he was at Oklahoma forever and obviously down at Clemson. And he looks like he could play like right now. He looks
Yeah.
like he could play. He has said he has these coaching nuggets of wisdom. Like what was it? He said something to Marty and myself, Marty McGee at SEC Media Days. He's like, when you're born, you look like your mom and dad. When you die, you look like your decisions. Come on.
What?
He said that. He said that literally, and Marty and I just went, "Whoa!" And
Oh my
Marty is a motivational like saying guy. So in the middle of the interview, I see Marty there writing it down. But I was like, I mean, that's like some I mean, some philosophical stuff. But I love Venables. But again, he looks like he could put on pads and play right now. Those are my like Kyle Whittingham at Utah.
Yeah.
Coach Witt could play right now. I'm convinced he would get a sack if he played right now.
Speaking of Clemson, is Clemson going to be in the bottom 10? Which, by the way, that'll be out Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah.
If so, are you prepared to deal with the wrath of one Dabo Sweeney for criticizing a 1-3 team?
So as we record this at 11 a.m. Eastern, I filed the story literally right before I logged on with you. So yeah, I can tell you, yes, they make an appearance, and I can tell you that I quote Crash Davis from Bull Durham, which was you have fungus on your shower shoes. You know, if you win 20 games in the big leagues, you can have fungus on your shower shoes, and the press will say you're colorful. If you're losing and you have fungus on your shower shoes, you're just a slob. That's kind of how I feel about Dabo. Like the preaching works, you know, when you win in 10 games. When it's not, you need to just, you know, start working on next year and don't yell at us.
Is Florida going to be bottom 10 for the rest of the season? Because it kind of feels like it.
Man, it's tough. It's getting crowded because you've got your regulars, right? You got your State of Kent, and you got Acrimonious, and Sam Houston is terrible.
Oh yeah.
UMass is always UMass we call them. But this year, the Power Four is trying their best to crash the party. I mean, I don't believe that Arkansas is a bad football team, but Arkansas right now is like watching those dash cam TikToks. Like, it starts and there's a truck in front of you and you don't know how it's going to hit a light pole, but it's definitely going to hit a light pole. That's how I feel about Arkansas right now. And, so do you take Arkansas? You take Arkansas State. Like, there's a lot to choose from. But yeah, between Florida and Clemson and, last year it was Florida State. Last year, Florida State was legit in the bottom 10, like by the end of September, and they just stayed there. The coveted fifth spot is for a team that's probably good, but had a bad weekend. Florida State graduated from that last year, and this year, Florida and Arkansas and some of the Clemson, some of these other ones, they're bypassing coveted fifth spot status.
You probably just need a spot for one of the big 3 Florida schools that somebody's just going to occupy that spot.
Yeah, just every year somebody's going to be in there. Yeah, Miami, I got bad news next year. You're probably if the circle of life.
Yeah. Last one for you. We'll tie it all back to Lane, since his name will inevitably be linked to the Florida job. You talked about Strickland earlier and having that dinner with boosters last year. If there is a hire to be made, as many have speculated, and you are Scott Strickland, I'm putting you in those shoes. Who's the guy that you're going all in to get?
Well, I don't know the answer, but I know who they need to be. They need to have a dynamic personality. And, I wrote this column when Billy got the job. I guess it was year 2. And I wrote about, you're asking a fan base for patience, because I believe in Billy Napier. I think he's building something. I think they have talent. I don't know that this is the right fit. But what I kept hearing from those boosters was he's boring. Like, that had as much to do with their problem with him as the losses, because they're spoiled rotten, right? I mean, Spurrier, even Zook and Muschamp, when they were losing, they were flipping out, right? I mean, there was some, and that's just not who Billy is. It's not who Billy was as a quarterback at Furman. It's not who he was when he coached Louisiana. It's just not who he is. And so whoever they get, they need to be a dynamic personality, because the Florida fans don't just want to win. They want to be entertained while they win. Urban Meyer, I would not describe as dynamic, but Urban Meyer definitely loves to give us all lectures on how to be better humans and people and all that stuff. So they need something along those lines. And so there needs to be a little something extra. So whoever it is, they need to bring a personality with them, because that's what the people in Gainesville want. Even if they're losing, they would like to be entertained. And Billy is a lot of things, and I love that. But entertaining is not on the list.
Ryan, you're the best. Everyone should go watch The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin on ESPN Wednesday night. It'll be available on the new ESPN app as well. Thanks for doing this, man.
You're the man.
All right, well, let's close with some Loud of the Week. I got one a little bit more serious, so why don't you start us off?
Perfect. I'm going to do a last of the week, and with the couple of big announcements here, I think it's a clear answer here, folks. It's Landry Kiffin. All right. At the end of the day, we could talk about Lane versus Witt and this whole thing, but the winner, regardless, is Landry Kiffin. Now, you could also argue she's the loser there because she has to obviously comfort one of these people. But I think that the way that, again, like I said, her personal brand has taken off. You guys have just heard from Ryan McGee on a little bit of this based on the kind of feature that he did, and he's one of the best in the business at this, right? It's the ability to say, hey, like I said, I'm going to control my personal brand. And the really heartwarming story that we talked about, and again, I referenced it, Ryan McGee referenced it, but as far as her having that heartfelt conversation with her dad about the Auburn job, and I think it's cool when these stories have a little bit of that happy ending where it's like, hey, like she's super happy in Oxford, Lane is super happy in Oxford. The resulting couple of years, it's like we write our own story, right? It could either be a comedy, a horror movie, or a feel-good story, right? And right now, and I think the book on that chapter at least is closed for these last couple of years, right? It's a feel-good story. And I think that it's cool that their family was able to kind of reunite there. I think it's cool. Like I remember a story when I was growing up where my mom almost sold our house. And I was very young. I was like 6 years old. And I like sat my mom down and I was like, can you just go walk through like the pros and cons? Like we had this beautiful house in Louisiana. It's got like all these, magnolia trees and everything. Like why would we go move in like a townhouse like after my parents broke up? And she was like, you know what? I could just remodel this house. And like kind of the same thing where it's like, hey, like having that kind of wherewithal and having that really cool relationship to say, hey, like actually I kind of do have a voice here and I want to give my take on this and you can weigh that. And really just humanizing Lane, I think is super cool.
You talked your mom out of moving when you were 6?
Finesse God. I was a prodigy. Yeah.
Holy cow. How have we never discussed this? That's unbelievable. That is impossible to do. I moved when I was 6. And so I'm picturing what that would have been like. Now, my parents did factor in kids in the neighborhood. That was a huge factor for like why we moved. So I was definitely part of that. But in no world could I have sat my mom down and gone, listen, here are the pros. Do you see those magnolia trees out there? We didn't have magnolia trees in Skokie, Illinois, but Dempster Street is lovely. And when I get older, it's going to be a great little downtown place to go to. There's no world in which I could have had that conversation as a 6-year-old. That's impressive, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of special circumstances because my parents had bought the house together. They had recently gotten divorced. My mom was kind of trying to clear the bad air, and she ended up remodeling the house kind of herself. And classic Sandy story where it was like her and her friends drinking wine, antiquing cabinets with like chains and stuff. She's just such a BA. But point being, it turned into a project for her and her friends and us and everything. And so, yeah, but like kind of having that moment, like I said, it was like, hey, I grew up like, Christopher Robin from Winnie the Pooh, where there was like this wooded area where I had no neighbors. And I think I was already kind of on the way to be who I was going to be, where it's like neighborhood kids, I was already kind of playing video games and inside and stuff. So it's not like we never had neighbors. So it's like, hey, you're going to find your social outlet at school regardless. So pretty much just having the ability to kind of grow up, kind of old world, right? It was super cool. And like I said, it was just like, hey, think about, we'll never get this back. And now that whole area has come up in Prairieville, Louisiana, and that house is like quadrupled in value. It's off a swamp road. You know what I'm saying? Like it was in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I mean, but point being back to like Landry Kiffin, it just shows such a cool trust and relationship. She's a little bit older and a lot more logic to her game, obviously, but it's just so cool to look back at that positively. And we write our own stories. My mom, same deal, was able to keep our house. And Kiffin was able to keep the job. So it just goes to show like we all just we write our own story with our hearts in the right place.
Another sliding doors to add to the Kiffin chapter. If Landry Kiffin is not good at iMovie, is Lane the coach at Auburn right now? Some people are wondering. Just saying.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Her with Canva, I'm sure given the TikTok success, it's probably a weapon. She's probably able to put that on top of her resume, convince Lane Kiffin to stay in Oxford, Mississippi. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at this.
Canva's got to chill. Canva's changing its format too much. Every single time I log into Canva, which is probably only about once a month, I don't use it nearly as often as like Lauren uses it constantly. But every single time I log into Canva, they're like, we changed our entire structure of our website. I'm like, can you just stay the same for 1 second so I can just figure out this one thing that I need to do every single time I make an image on here? Like, can you guys just chill? All right.
It's the Gen Alpha and the Zoomers. They're the target market. They got to have more and different. Yeah.
Ridiculous. All right. My lad of the week is Sean Clark, the former App State, and he was the UCF offensive line coach when he died earlier this week. Just really, really sad. Got taken to the hospital a couple of weeks ago, undisclosed, and it was one of those things that you see it and you're like, okay, we're kind of accustomed to seeing football coaches have medical emergencies, and that's not to say that we should normalize it, but we're a bit numb to that. And seeing a 50-year-old football coach in the hospital, you're like, man, I hope he's able to take care of his health. And then died very unexpectedly 2 weeks later at the age of 50. He was lad of the week 3 years ago after he led App State to the win at A&M, a stunning win at the time when A&M is in the top 10. Didn't matter that A&M ended up being a 5-win team and just was obviously not up for the task that year. But I remember we talked so much about that, the post-game interview that he had with Taylor McGregor that has since gone like re-viral. And if you've since watched it, like you see like a guy that just got so choked up. And I just loved with Sean Clark how present he was in this moment. And he wasn't worried about his future. What does this mean for the rest of the university? Blah, blah, blah. Just appreciating that moment for his alma mater. It meant everything. And the Charlotte Observer's Ethan Joyce had a great piece on Clark that I read. And it talked about how like Ethan had his first child with his wife. And within an hour, he gets a FaceTime from Sean Clark. I'll let you people in on a little bit of a secret here. After Claire was born, I did not have a college football coach FaceTiming me within an hour to ask how everything went. That is special. That is unique. You just don't see college football coaches doing that to a media member. And I always have a soft spot and an appreciation, whatever you want to call it, for coaches who treat members of the media as individuals, not, kind of generalize us by putting us in a box. We talked about that with Brian Kelly, and one of my annoyances of like, he basically said like all the media was asking this question. It was really one person, and how that's just, it's a frustrating thing that we obviously work against. But I just like it when coaches kind of understand that we are indeed human beings, and just as they are as well. Clark was one of these guys who was retained by Eli Drinkwitz at App State. And then Drink has since credited him for being kind of the glue that held that program together and why they were ultimately able to be so good in 2019. And then, the job that he did there, 3 9-win seasons, including one with Joey Aguilar in 2023. It just like your heart just goes out to that family, man. I am so gutted for his wife and 2 kids. Just awful news this week, and hope that his family is doing okay amidst these really, really hard times.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, a guy like I was trying to double check as far as like the overlap with Aguilar. No, obviously he was at UCF, a place that he. No,
2023 he was with them at App State. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm saying like now he was with UCF at the time, and it's just like a guy who has been well regarded in several different places. And to your point, like that was just such a moment against A&M where it's like, okay, we have kind of the empire in A&M that, with all the funding and all the stuff, they hadn't exactly earned, the level of coverage and everything. On the other side, we have App State with this dude who's just so happy to be here. And it's kind of embodying everything that we love about college sports, where it's like, these guys are here for the right reason. And not that there's like a good and a bad to this, but it's like, when everybody's locked in, everybody's pulling the same way, anything really can be possible in sports and kind of, in life. And so I think it's really cool to see a guy who embodied that. And it's just every corner of it, from the UCF guys, the App State guys, have had something really positive to say about him. So I think it's really cool.
Chris Vanini talked about this in The Athletic. And I'm 100% guilty of this, of how we struggle so much in this business to let group of 5 teams kind of have their moment and not instantly talk about coach who gets big time win at group of 5 level and all the jobs he's instantly rumored for. Like, it's just natural the way that these conversations progress, and we look at it through that lens, and I like, it's inevitable. I'm not saying that that's going to change. It just, it does kind of stink that it has to happen that way. And I even remember, talking about the different jobs that Sean Clark could get and what would he leave his alma mater for. We're instantly talking about that after the fact, but so that's why I go back to how cool it was to see him just so present in that moment. He's not trying to sit there and sell anything. He's like, I'm having a good time on the lake tonight, just enjoying himself, and meant so much to Boone. And I know he's going to be greatly missed in the college football community. Will, can we end with one more positive one? I know we've gone long. This is a long pod this week. You knew it was going to be a long pod. Jordan Davis forever. Jordan Davis forever. That's the Philadelphia Eagles superstar, former Georgia superstar, not the country music singer, who is becoming more and more popular and is getting a little bit tougher because of Jordan Davis's LSU affiliation. Jordan Davis, the football player, my God, the blocked field goal return for a touchdown. Next Gen Stats had 18.59 miles per hour as the fastest speed ever recorded for a 300-pound ball carrier. And I know Jordan Davis lost weight this offseason. He's still well north of 300 pounds.
See, that's good weight. That's what Billy Napier was talking about right there. He's carrying good fat with him. I think after a certain point of speed, the alerts on PFF or the tracking software just say, "Oh Lord, he coming! Oh Lord, get out the way!"
He's running away from dudes. I've watched that clip so many times. Kyle Pagan for our sister site Crossing Broad did a very funny reenactment of it, which is essentially like the Michael Scott run past the radar outside. Can you get up to Jordan Davis's speed? how much can the average person do to get to that level?
I would love to start a trend there where we just go talk to fast. Let's go talk to Nick Harbor and say, can we do a little Jordan Davis thing? Can you just see how quickly you can get to Jordan Davis speed? Because it's hard to do, I'm sure players can do it, but you got to be that level of fast to get to that top end speed.
The coordination that it takes to pull off that play, that man needs to be studied. He needs to be studied for science. I truly think that whenever Jordan Davis's football career ends, he will be one of the true physical marvels that the NFL has ever seen. I really do. He's unbelievable, man. Only he could have a moment like that. Just can't believe it, man.
It's so funny because he's always going to be compared to Jalen Carter and Derek Brown, right? Because of kind of where they went in the draft. And it's like both of those guys are so awesome. And it's like, but don't forget about Jordan Davis. If you give him more opportunities.
50 snaps. He's playing 50 snaps in games this year.
Oh, yeah.
With this new physique that he has. He's returning kicks like that. I mean, God, I love Jordan Davis.
Yeah, it stands from day one, man. Absolutely. He's just so good for football.
Yeah. All right. That's a pod. Please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Saturday Down South, where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter @the SDS Pod, @SatsDownSouth, @CJ Guerrero, @GoSoHard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.